Good evening and welcome to the Littleton Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, September 10th, 2018. Two of our colleagues will not be able to join us tonight. Selectman Knox is under the weather and Selectman DeCoste is out of town on business. But we have a working quorum and we'll get through everything. If we will, Madam Clerk, you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If, while everyone's standing, you wouldn't mind, we have a piece of sad news and business for the town of Littleton today. We learned over the weekend that a longtime friend of many of us, our former longtime police chief, former selectman, former Board of Health member, all-around great guy, Tom O'Day, passed away. And we miss him. And if you had the opportunity to know him, you probably get some happy memories at this very moment, and probably stories that we can't tell on live television. But Tom, we miss you, and for once we'll be quiet for you. Thank you. All right, I'll run through the agenda before Keith takes us into the mail. After the mail, most of the meeting is associated with topics relevant to or relative to articles on the prospective articles on the special town meeting for October 29th. First off, planning and zoning related articles. We'll deal with those. I do see members of the planning board here and their administrator, as well as master plan implementation committee representation. Various public works related articles, and of course administration, finance articles as well. And a variety of folks are in the audience, including Finance Director Bonnie Halston and Finance Committee Chair Fred Faulkner. After we get through that section of the evening, we will entertain public input and members' updates. A target time of 8 o'clock, we'll be doing a review of fiscal FY 2019 Selectmen's goals with an eye toward the FY 2020 budget and possible considerations there. At 8:30, town administrator and assistant town administrator departments, a few items there, highway road salt contract and a gift acceptance with the fire department. We have minutes to approve. We also have a pending executive session to deal with both union and non-union contract strategies. So with that, Mr. Bergman.
Okay, in the mail packet tonight are a few things. First is the police department has an open house on Saturday, September 29th, from 11 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. More information is available online. We received notice of the award of a grant of $4,900 under the state's recycling dividends program for our highway department. So congratulations to them once again for the grant. There is a statewide municipal partnerships conference that will be on Monday, September 24th, the date of our next meeting. It's during the day from 8:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. And it's talking about potential funding, things you can do under the Community Compact Cabinet program, which has best practices, grant opportunities, information technology, and what's called efficiency and regionalization programs. And I wanted to just call out this for a bit because we've scheduled for the evening of the 24th a discussion about those grant opportunities. And just over the weekend, we found out that the town of Acton is trying to assemble neighboring communities now for a grant, for an IT grant application that is due this Friday. And it would be for doing aerial photography, and it's cheaper to do it together. And they found a model of some communities on the South Shore that applied in a previous round and were funded, so Acton has reached out to us, and they're reaching out to their neighbors to see if there's interest in applying for a grant. And while we haven't had our global discussion about which projects would we want to prioritize for grant funding under Community Compacts program, I thought I'd at least make you aware of that opportunity that we could pursue if they were interested. Nancy Glencross and Chris Stoddard both indicated that this is something we'd want to be able to address, and if we can get it done through a grant with other towns that's more competitive, we'd want to try to pursue that. And then last, we have a Friends of the Littleton Council on Aging luncheon, which will be on Wednesday, September 19th at noon.
All sold out, I understand. No room.
They must know the warrant closes at that hour, so they all want to get together.
Okay.
Oh, and one other thing that I would mention, and I had prepared this, that the Central Mass Mosquito Project was scheduled to do spring today. And it's been rescheduled to, do we know to when?
Wednesday evening.
Wednesday evening, so
Dusk.
so we just updated the map online, and so the spraying that was going to be done tonight will be done on Wednesday.
Roughly the Bruce Street area?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Keith, do you want to walk us through the special town meeting?
Sure, and I think I'll start just to sort of set the tone for what we've got. We have, and not in the same order that they're in the warrant, or that they're in the, on the agenda tonight, but on the screen is a list of the 12 articles that we had in the packet at our last meeting that we've circulated to staff. And you'll hear about all of those articles tonight, and for the discussions, we've lumped them into planning and zoning, so here first from Master Plan Committee and the Planning Board, then Public Works, here from the sewer team and the Water Department, and we can also talk to you about some road projects. Chris Stoddard is not able to be here tonight, he's ill. And then lastly, as the chair had mentioned, in administration and finance category, we can go over some of those, but this is the list of 12. And I think we can start with the planning and zoning articles. First one listed is master plan implementation from Mike Zeldin.
Mr. Zeldin, the floor is yours.
Good evening. After multiple, shall we say, rounds, let me just summarize it this way. During the master plan implementation meeting involving a workshop involving the town, we had a very good turnout, and two important things emerged from that to summarize for the common. One is that the vast majority of people attending that particular workshop and the follow-up that we got from other residents through an online polling system indicated an interest basically in we'll call a much more housing-dense common than the one we have at the moment. That is more housing than currently is there. The second thing that emerged from that is a very, very strong desire to have control over what the common, how the common works, and therefore what the common looks like. It is understood, it was understood by the members there, by the residents there, that the kind of density that they had endorsed depended very heavily on having infrastructure to support it. You can have n number of houses, but unless you have the infrastructure, you can't have the housing. And so, in a certain sense, the availability of infrastructure is just as important as how it looks and how the common works. In this connection, the consultants, Fort Point, that MPIC had contracted, made the recommendation to us that we use a different form of coding for regulation that is currently in use. I will define the one we're currently using, which is called Euclidean, which simply means we write things down in text form and specify use. In form-based, which we're proposing to use and proposing to get a contract for, and I'll give you the amount, we further specify how the buildings should be positioned and what they look like, including, we can go as far as materials are concerned. And the idea here is to make the common as, shall we say, resident preferentially expressed as possible. That's the concept. So in this connection, it would regulate parking, where the parking goes, the heights of the building, all that usual material that covers coding, but in addition, the positioning of the buildings, how property owners and developers should follow a certain set of, shall we say, guidelines in the course of redeveloping their particular property, should they elect to do so. In connection with this, after consulting with the consultants that we're planning on deploying for this, we've come up with a budget not for 35 or 38, but it actually is closer to $42,000. I don't expect the town necessarily at the end of the day to be able to or to want to pay for the entire amount, but with having this investment made, we're in a very good, strong position to make a strong application to the state, which very much would like to incorporate and use form-based coding throughout the state to avoid urban sprawl, suburban sprawl, and better use of neighborhoods. So between our own investment, plus what's available, plus our approach, I'm confident that we could probably do very well in our competition to secure money from the state in order to support this. But just in case, I've incorporated a recent budget of approximately $42,000 that I'm hoping the town will be willing to support to the end of providing the necessary coding regulations to meet the requirements that our residents have requested.
Okay, let me just ask maybe one multi-cause question to ensure that I have the ask. So you're looking on behalf of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, I assume in consultation with the Planning Board, since they're our partners in creating
Yes,
you,
yep.
to engage consulting services, and the request would be for $42,000, and that would be to specifically draft zoning code regulations that were following the form-based system, specifically geared toward the Littleton Common area as we've defined it.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's for the Littleton Common. That's all. It's not the town. It's the Little Common. It's in fact form-based. Just to be clear, I don't mean to dive into the thing. It's meant to be used in very specific areas by choice of residents. It's not considered to be a widespread unless you're doing a town from scratch. That's not what we're doing here. We're doing a common.
Okay, I'll start with board members. Any questions or comments? Cindy?
I'll start.
Okay.
I was just, so this was discussed at the planning board meeting, and what was the planning, I know there's two members here, or Ed's here.
Yeah, well, we'll get you into the conversation
Yeah,
quickly, too.
I'm just curious what their feedback was about this. And how about in the building inspector? Did Roland have any input on this, or?
No, the only thing I've been doing at the moment, I've not tried to pull, it's the planning board I'm working with primarily because they're ultimately the ones in terms of planning who take full responsibility for moving forward. And our job, I just want to remind everyone, is to guide and promote. We don't
Right.
write the code.
Right. No, I understand that. I just, and I know we've had discussions about the need for affordable housing, the needs for varying types of housing in Littleton. So in that regard, I support it. The diagram that is shown scares me. I have to be honest with you. Just looking at the common in that regard with that amount of housing, and I know that doesn't necessarily reflect what would be built there. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, yes, this is not a building sketch, but this is,
Yeah, what it could be.
this is the maximum, shall we say, this is the density, I believe, that was, if I read the scenario correctly, this is the maximum density that the people who attended, which include the residents, stakeholders, and property owners, said they preferred.
Okay.
But was not the maximum density
Oh, no, there's.
option?
No,
correct?
there is another option above this that did not.
Is this option 4? I
That
can't
was option,
remember.
yeah, option 4 has a lot of, quote, other benefits to it, but this is the one that I think represents the balance, and the town
Right.
wisely, I think, is looking at this one.
Right.
This would be the max.
Max, okay.
Okay.
All right, great, thanks.
Chase? do you have a-
Typical question, so we've got the budget, we've got a sense of the scope. Let's talk for a second about schedule and timing. When might we actually see the draft versions of these, and what is the trajectory after the draft form-based code is prepared?
Okay, if we're able to, we're going to start the process, if approved, as soon as the funds become available. We already have some funds to get us started that are still within the budget that we have for zoning as part of the revitalization program. So as that work goes along, we'll be consuming those funds. I'm hoping by spring, the spring town meeting, we will see our first set of drafts that will be available. But remember, I have to remember, we have to go through the process not only with the planning board and their hearings and all those, but also town council. And also they have to conform, this is very important, conform ahead of time with state mandate on this. So I would say spring is the earliest where we can expect to see something. I'm hoping by that time, the other parts of infrastructure that are vital for the common also are more or less tracking along the same path.
Okay, and within that schedule and within the budget that we have in front of us,
Yeah.
do you have a sense for the number of public involvement sessions that are incorporated into this budget? And do we think that's enough? Because it's one thing to talk about ideas, it's a very different thing to talk about, here's what the code actually is, and parsing that. So
Yeah.
I'd like to understand what those.
We have at the moment, you hit on, as chairman, one of my big concerns is exactly that. And at the moment, we have 4 scheduled for that, 4 public engagements. The master plan had 4, I'll call it 4.5. And we try to schedule it to meet all the needs, the various, shall we say, schedules of our residents, which is all over the map, but we do the best we can. If necessary, I'll be happy to return to this board and all necessary boards to obtain additional funds if we need to have more. Because I think it's very vital that people see and comment and provide feedback, because it's the way form-based really works is if you have a talented, shall we say, drafting capability, they're able to capture consistently what the residents are after. By the way, I should also point out that we have a colleague nearby in the town of Air. They have someone on there who are following form-based code for 2 areas, 2 sites. And they have someone on their staff who can do form-based. So they're in a, shall we say, a different position. We don't have to be in that position, I'm just saying, we're not alone.
Second question, or third or fourth, or wherever we're at now.
Go to you're done. How's that?
In terms of budget for engaging town council, I imagine we're going to need a non-trivial amount of town council support where this is concerned. Is that incorporated in the budget? Should that be incorporated in the budget? Keith's shaking his head.
No, town council services are always in the operating budget.
Always.
Yeah, and, yeah. We don't separate them out.
And I'm just, by the way, they're quite versatile. They've seen this before.
In the bills that we get from town council, we can identify which are associated with which projects, but just from a billing standpoint, we don't charge them to articles, we charge them to the operating budget, so we can see all of the legal services in one place.
Is there an argument to be made here to reconsider that in the context of something that's got such a potential for state funding?
I don't think so. If we were going to do it, it would be, I would think every time we have when we go and get money to do consulting services for zoning, we know that we're going to incur expenses from town council. And I think the difference is where we're not asking town council to write it, we're asking a consultant to write it and town council to review it, then I think it's appropriate to have it in have his time be in his operating budget.
And if we, historically, if we'd had a need for a specialized counsel on a given project from time to time, then we hire somebody outside. But zoning work is very much part of the
Yeah.
the expertise
Miari's
of our.
in
Yeah,
Miari's in Harrington could handle zoning.
yeah.
from within.
Keith, are you able to isolate and expand those two photos? Because I'd like to get just back to that component of the sales pitch here before I.
The one that,
invite-
you mean this?
Yeah, this one, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what let me make it bigger.
Because, and I'll say this prefatory to getting folks to take a look at that, is it's interesting and very true that the reminder that the potential impact on housing in the common area as a realization of something that we've always talked about in terms of mixed use, because, well, in large measure, that's what it was pre-zoning. It was mixed use by definition. Now, what level of density we want to swallow on that, that's a, decision we can make later. But what I'm particularly excited about, what form zoning has the potential of doing, is being able to guide us in the direction of doing something like this. And these are real photographs, right? In a particular place, Chincoteague Island, Virginia, where you can almost imagine pieces of Goldsmith Street or whatever, maybe not looking quite as drab as what's on the left, but hopefully, the possibilities for frontage on buildings and setbacks and a revisitation of the whole physical appearance to make and the infrastructure to support that, sidewalks, crosswalks, et cetera.
It may look different after Hurricane Florence, though.
That's true, it's heading right
Pretty
there,
close
isn't
by.
it? Yeah, before and after again, right? But anyway, I think the strongest argument for form-based is an opportunity to take physical appearance of the buildings and its function in a walkable downtown and make it front and center. And to that end, and beyond that, on the variety of these questions, planning board members or administrator, do you folks have some input on this to the extent that you've heard the pitch so far?
I'll be happy to speak. Ed Mullen, Planning Board. Anna Houston's also here, who's been doing a lot of research, so I'd also like to give her the opportunity to speak on this. But my opinion is that when I did some research on form-based, it works towards look, feel, and touch, and how it functions with our town, as opposed to meeting setbacks, height restrictions, floor to area ratio, whatever you want to apply to typical Euclidean zoning. I'd much rather see it, what we're talking about, is form-based in our downtown area. How it gets applied, when it gets applied.
And the devil's in the details too, of course.
But I think this is a great first step. I'd certainly like to see us move forward with it in the Littleton Common Business District.
Is that, I don't want to have you speak for everybody, was the board more or less in consensus on that, or?
My recollection is that we sent Mike forward to you guys with our blessing to request it, that we thought it was a good idea. If I'm misremembering it, I'll have Maren straighten me out.
If I may, just so you're not totally surprised, the Fort Point, who basically came up with a recommendation and molded with Maren's help where we are today, they're going to be visiting with you and giving you a full-blown presentation on what this is about and how they plan on going about doing it. So you're going to hear, as planning board, you're going to hear a lot more about it.
Look forward to it.
Okay, and Anna?
So I think, excuse me, I think as.
Anna
Ed-
Houston, planning board member
Anna Houston,
from,
planning board member. So I think as Ed has said, there's definitely a lot to be excited about for this particular type of zoning. The big question, I think, is not so much as to whether or not we want it, whether we think it would be good for the common, but rather when. What is the appropriate timing to be able to be doing this, and are we putting the cart before the horse? So a little bit of additional information in terms of what the revitalization work entails is we are planning an open house event in October that the consultants will be then presenting the scenarios with more detail around it to make sure that it is what, in fact, residents want to see. And so then a couple weeks later, going to town meeting and requesting dollars for this. And, the question is whether or not this needs to be, whether or not this is going to be something very positive for the town, or whether or not it's going to
be something that we want to consider for the future. So for me, it's a timing issue, because as Mike pointed out, infrastructure came up at the workshop back in July, and infrastructure includes the sewer. So we're introducing something new at town meeting related to infrastructure regarding the sewer, and this is another infrastructure item. So is doing both of them at the same time a good idea or not?
Okay.
So I would pose that back to you all as to whether or not you think it's a good idea.
We're always looking for guidance, so.
Okay, I'll be,
Well, I think that's something we
It's a
have,
good
we have to
point.
ponder, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't suppose it's ever too early to, start exploring what it could mean for us, but as far as what form it takes, that probably could play out over time.
So I think the timing of this coinciding with the infrastructure question it's a feature, not a bug, in the sense that we have an opportunity to look at this at multiple levels, both literally and figuratively. And so having this discussion in the context of also discussing the infrastructure seems to me to be a natural and ideal fit for it. Though I'm receptive to the idea that some residents may feel very differently about that, like we're going too fast.
Correct.
But the ability to do something comprehensive could be lost if we do it too incrementally too.
Correct, and that's part of why I wanted to pose that question to you all, because it could be a very positive aspect, or it may not be, depending on what your perspective is as selectmen, and the fact that, in particular, Mr. Burbidge has to, and Mr. Lady have to talk about the sewer at town meeting. So I wanted to make sure to bring up
Yeah.
the timing component.
Personally, I guess I'm with Chase on this, that I think that, if we talked about sewer without the context of the common, we get whacked for that. It's like, well, you can't be talking about this without imagining it in, a future common that has different uses and different walkabilities, different look to it. So I think, they're much different in scope anyways at this stage. I mean, the sewer is a pretty sizable capital project, and the zoning, while important, is a modest financial project. Having them happen at the same time, to me, I think is a natural. I think the more important consideration is getting it right than trying to do one before the other. But that's open for comment.
Second comment related to planning board. So I think the planning board does have a lot more to go through in terms of its own education process. So I think that learning about this in more detail is still really quite important to be
Sure.
able to execute it properly.
Okay. Fred?
Yeah, listening to the conversation.
This is Fred Faulkner, this is Finance Committee Chair.
Looking at the plan that was up there in terms of density, if it ends up looking something like that in terms of density, a little more, a little less, how does that impact the capacity that we're envisioning for the sewer system? And there must be some way to model that and make sure that we don't put in a sewer system that then throttles
Right.
what your vision is for that common.
Great point. I'm sure we don't have the answer for that, but I do notice our two engineering consultants are scribing away just that point. So I think that's something we probably ought to try to get an answer to sooner rather than later. And we've been putting these folks to the test with changes to the model on the fly pretty good. But that's an important
But I think,
consideration.
dovetailing
Yep.
this plan with the infrastructure, I think now's the time to do it,
Yeah.
not later. Right?
And that's how you avoid missing some of those considerations. If you did one without the other, you could potentially leave yourself in a bad position. So duly noted, Weston and Sampson, right, okay.
You guys got 30 minutes, let's see what you can do.
actually, I believe you've been in contact with the consultant who generated the scenario, so you already have the numbers or the framework to do the estimate.
All right.
Yep.
Michael, I'll ask you one more question from me, just to remind ourselves that this is actually in the context of the funding article request. Could you speak a little bit more to how do we arrive at 42,000? Just, I'm sure the Finance Committee's dying to know we are too. How do we get there?
Okay, we got to the $42,000 in a series of steps, and also using, I would call it, information obtained from how other folks with similar projects experience it financially. And the heavy emphasis that we placed in the course of our trying to develop how do we achieve what the town wants, to achieve a balance between doing it right, and doing it right consists not only technically of getting very good renditions. It's sort of like architecture with art. It really is. It's both. Plus, making sure, as has been pointed out, that we have sufficient engagement with all sections of the public to make sure that we're landing on it. So the budget reflects meetings that are intensively focused on input from the public, as well as trying to get high-quality
So
renditions.
the 42,000 will include public
That's the idea.
engagement,
Right.
artful renditions, and the code language?
Well, they're one of the, yes, we're in the weeds, but the renditions are the code language, that's the point. And I just would say, if we need more, if the quality or quantity is enough, someone like me will be back.
Okay. Let me just, point out to the audience, we do have about 13 other items here. I don't expect them to be as long, perhaps. We live to learn. But if there's any other comments on this article, speak now, but you'll get another chance. You don't have to forever hold your peace. We'll be back on the agenda again later. All right.
And just to my feet, we're not going any higher than 42, because can we close it tonight?
I'm stopping, yeah,
Okay,
so
'cause
I'd much rather
We
write,
went from 31 to
Yeah.
35
Yeah,
and
yeah.
42.
this is now stabilized
Right,
here.
okay.
That's why we put you on first in the agenda before it grew further. You know, we just want to.
No, this is my agenda, this is it.
42.
We're done.
Thank you.
Done playing.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. Keith, transfer ownership of Durkey Farm parcels to the town of Littleton. Who speaks to
Yeah,
that?
the planning board, this is brought to us from a subdivision. Let me see if I can find just so we see that the two parcels, A and B, that are shown on this map are to be deeded to the town of Littleton as a result of the subdivision plan approved by the planning board, but we do need to have a town meeting vote to acquire those two parcels. So we will be bringing that forward to town meeting. I don't think that they're restricted in their use, or are they? The article does not restrict them. I mean, they're called open space parcels, but I think that's open space.
It's open space.
Yeah.
It's not,
Yeah, I mean, functionally, they're restricted pretty
Right.
heavily
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
a vast amount
Especially
of
the-
wetland space.
Right, yeah, as far as the land.
Stormwater retention.
You're right, and there's, as a practical matter, that they won't be able to be used for
not many ball
development.
fields there.
Right, so,
I mean, there is an upland corner to the northwest that is usable. I don't know what the deed
Yeah.
actually calls for in parcel B, but
I think we've, Ed Mullen Planning Board, we've had discussions with the bike and pedestrian group, and they're gonna hopefully access that upper piece to get to the train station through the cave property and back all the way
Great.
up. So there's gonna be a bike trail on the high and dry side.
sure.
But certainly, we would hope that the wetlands would remain wetlands and unobstructed or unused, except by the wildlife, with all those corridors we put in.
Right.
and at a future date, there'll be another parcel coming from this subdivision,
Yes,
The
the
one
old
that's-
farmhouse.
the one, yeah, with the farmhouse, but that's not in this deed
Right.
that's coming to town meeting.
And this is only for the open space portions? This isn't the roads or any other components of the actual infrastructure, is that right?
Right, only for the first two pieces of open space. There are others that will be later.
Right, so just
Just A and
exclusively
B
what's
for
A and
now.
B on that map.
There are other
right?
letters to come,
Yeah.
so.
Okay. Cindy, any
Yep.
questions right now?
No, I'm all set.
Okay, anyone else in the audience want to speak? All right, thank you. And the zoning amend the accessory apartments bylaw. That sounds like a plan.
I don't have a picture and a slide, I have the text, and it's really tiny text, so.
Whatever you want to explain it to us?
Give us the thumbnail version.
Great, I get to do this one too. I came to watch tonight, by the way.
I'm sure Maren will do a fine job if you want to designate that.
So, in our discussions, we've had currently 2 proposals before us, senior residential developments. And what we're seeing is.
Oh, this is the accessory.
Accessory apartment first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll do
Sorry.
the other one.
Great. Accessory apartment, the building department came to us because what they're finding out is that with what we wrote as an accessory apartment bylaw, some restrictions for affordability to still do what we would classify typically as an in-law or a dependent use accessory apartment. With the bylaw the way it's written currently, way we rewrote it, they had to comply with the building code. And with compliance with the building code, it drove the cost up to create these accessory use apartments. So with the dependency requirement added into that, they can go back to the old bylaw, which gives them the 3-year look back. So it gets inspected, it gets a 3-year look back. It has to be owner occupied, one or the other, and the other one is a dependent in that unit. And then they don't have to meet all the restrictive building code requirements, the fire separation, and so on, because the building department will be doing the 3-year inspection to make sure that it's safely maintained. So it's a way to reduce cost on the family that needs it, but can do the full investment on a unit that could be rented to other than a dependent family member.
Members? Anyone?
I guess I
Yeah.
I don't totally understand it. To be
Thank
100%
you for
honest.
saying that.
Let's give Mara a shot at it.
The planning board will be holding their public hearing on September 20th on the bylaw. We'll have a, definition at that point and get public input on it. Mostly it's a tweak to the existing accessory apartment bylaw to add the dependent type of unit to respond to some inquiries to the building department. And then it'll maintain the other 2 types of accessory apartments that are allowed. One that's interior to a home, and then one by special permit that would be exterior to a home. It's all in response to what we've heard with the current bylaw, trying and using that.
Okay, does that help?
Not yet, but I imagine,
That's what I said.
I
It makes
imagine
sense to me.
that's what.
Annie, you want to take a shot at it?
What the public hearing will help answer those questions.
Okay, good segue. All right, any other member of the public rather want to opine or ask a question relative to the accessory apartments bylaw amendment? You'll have more opportunities to do so. How about that senior residential development
How about
amendment?
Well, given the last planning board meeting, when there was some discussion about how we could amend the bylaw to be able to include more of the things that people say they want in senior housing and exclude the things that we don't want in senior housing development. So this particular bylaw amendment, or these particular amendments are being put out there specifically to talk about price points in the intentions. We wanted to be very clear about what we intend to have in our senior housing, as well as housing for people or persons with disabilities. We also wanted to establish where within the community of Littleton we actually wanted to have senior housing, and the support behind that being that it should be in an area that is good for seniors to be in, where they can still have their independence in getting out. The third change is in reference to the open space and being more specific about how much open space we're requiring. And then the other one would be around, I guess we would call them amenities, external amenities. What can seniors actually get out and do on that open space? So identifying a little bit more information there. And then probably the big item that we talked a lot about was around affordability. And at this point, the way that the amendment is written is inclusionary housing, at least 50% of the dwelling units shall be affordable housing. That's for a discussion point. So we know that 50% is a number different than we've had before, so I think that will can cause a lot of good discussion at the next meeting. And we also wanted to make it very clear that any future senior residential development needs to be consistent with the goals and intentions of the Littleton Master Plan. I mean, that's where we started from, that we heard from the residents about what they wanted, and we need to be consistent with that. So by putting it in the bylaw, hopefully that will be crystal clear.
Now, you have points there, but do we have a language, specific language yet on that? We do?
Yes.
There is, yeah, in the warrant, in the
Oh, it's
draft
in the
warrant in the
warrant, okay,
packet, it's, this one is Article 11 on pages 5
Yeah.
and 6. The previous one is on accessory amendments is proposed Article 10.
Okay. Question I have, I mean, it's just I wonder how you expect to have a permanent bylaw that speaks to price points that are by nature volatile, and then by having the town step in and put its thumb on the scale also impacts, the price ranges for private market sales.
Well, I think that's part of it, right, is having variety. I mean, the sentence itself reads a variety of housing types, sizes, settings, residential services, and price points. So I think one of the things that we saw was we have had a couple of applicants who have come in, and their price point tends to be higher than what we'd really want to see, especially for our Littleton seniors. And so what we're saying is just we want a variety of pricing. Can we get some applicants who come in who provide housing at a lower price point? Higher price points can be there too, but we need to have that variety. So that's all that's saying. We're not setting price points, we're just saying we want a variety of price points.
Within a given project. Okay. Is that Mr. Mullins?
So some of the discussions that have been had, we talked about different sliding scales, keeping the 10% affordability that's in the original bylaw at 80% API. And then have a sliding scale for an additional 15%. That was one proposal, whether you go up or down at that 80%, so that you can move it, so it's beneficial to the developer and the town, and the residents of the town. You can put a preference for Littleton residents after that 10%. I think if we didn't create the bylaw originally to make it a windfall for any one developer. We made it so it would be beneficial to our seniors. And we're looking to create something that will actually be beneficial to our seniors. We're just not seeing that with the proposals we have now. So we're hoping that with an amendment somewhere, in my opinion, less than 50, but that's to be debated amongst us, to make it beneficial for all.
Right. Again, this is a case where, and I haven't studied your, how you arrived at the proposed changes you make, but with, I think the details and how it might play out are critically important, because if you're trying to impact a proposal where a developer is saying, okay, I'm gonna have X number of houses at 400,000, and you say that's too much, well, there's a market for $400,000 out there right now in private home sales, people looking to sell and move to Florida, move to, the mountains or wherever, and if you make the proposed units that were built for 400,000, 300,000, you've just crushed the market for all those folks who own private
all the
homes.
comps in the area, absolutely. And we're aware of that, and that's why we're having this discussion, is how do we make it work for everybody? And I think one of the components might be that sliding scale at 10%, and then something moving up to 100, 120,
Yeah.
in the affordability range.
Okay.
Ultimately, if we don't do anything, we're not gonna benefit our seniors, so
No,
we need to do
it's
something.
difficult work, and, you just implemented this a year ago, you're working out the kinks, I get all that, and I just think that's important to consider the impacts of every proposed change, too.
I appreciate you, you're beating the same drum I beat all the time, so.
Okay, all right. Other board member points on this?
No, I've been attending the planning board meetings where these bylaws have been discussed, and I'm looking forward to the meeting on the 20th, when we review them again, so I don't have any questions right now.
Okay, crowd members, we're not the planning board, but if you want to take a whack at a question, they're here. That's fine, we can move on. I'm sure you don't mind either. Oh, Julie?
I guess I have kind of an informal comment. Julie Rupp, New Cigarette. thinking about the senior housing bylaw, you know, back before this was created, I remember watching a number of videos where the seniors described what their wants were, what their price points were. You know, I live in a small cape that would probably be appropriate for a senior, before they couldn't do stairs. And so I think about my bills versus what a senior might want. And, you know, and this is a tough problem. I'm happy that you guys are, are taking care of it, but, you know, if the market won't bear what our seniors need, you know, and then we just start creating these developments that are not affordable for our seniors, you know, it's tough. Like, how do you meet the objective within the way the economy is right now? And I don't know the answer to that, but I do think a good question is, if what we're trying to build is not gonna meet the needs of the seniors, which is the whole purpose in the first place, you know, it just needs a real good solid look.
And I think this ties back to the very first discussion we were having tonight when Mike was sitting before you, when it ties to, you know, revitalization of downtown, the infrastructure, and the housing components that you could put down there. I think we have an opportunity to create one thing that solves a lot of problems, you know, that we're trying to create. So hopefully this all works together and ties together, and maybe as a planning board, we can draft a component that ties in with form-based code in the Littleton Common Business District, so.
Yeah. And real quick to add to what Ed was just saying, to actually read what that citing piece says, site within such proximity to the Village Common Business District, the point, or the MBTA station, so that in the judgment of the planning board, one or more of these locations would serve to support senior health, mobility, independence, and participation in the community. So those are the recommended sites for senior housing in town.
Okay.
Is,
sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are you sure? 'Cause
Yep.
Okay.
I get to talk all I want, go for it.
Jennifer Manicum, Cricket Lane. Would there be a consideration in the drafting of or the change to the bylaw that addressed, you know, who knows? We could pass this bylaw in October and then still find that there may be adjustments that need to be made the following year. You know, this seems to be a big problem. So, would there ever be anything included that would put a hold on current projects that are being discussed under the bylaw if the bylaw is up for discussion? For example, there are 2 projects being discussed right now, and now all of a sudden, you know, and they don't necessarily fit what we think the bylaw should be in the future. So, would that ever be part of the bylaw?
I'm going to let someone else deliver the bad news on that. Maren?
Maren Tupel, town planner, state law would not allow the town to do that.
And it's because of their pre-existing non-conforming, and they would not be subject to a subsequent amendment to the zoning
At
bylaw.
the time they were filed, they met the
What they
terms
had-
that the town
zoning
was
as
asking.
existed when they filed is what counts.
Okay, all right. Again, this is principally a planning board article, meaty topic, more discussion to come, but I'm not sure we need any more detail on it tonight here. I think it's pretty clear what you're dealing with. Want to move on to the public works articles, Keith?
And just to say again that
Thank you.
the public hearing on the 2 zoning amendments will be on Thursday, September 20th. Okay. On public works articles, one of them, and again, apologies, Chris Stoddard, our DPW director, is ill tonight and not able to be here, but one of the articles we need to bring forward is the acceptance of Foster Street from Taylor to Harwood. And the reason will sound familiar, because about 3 or 4 years ago, we asked town meeting to accept New Estate Road and Nagog Hill Road. Why? Because we were about to spend a lot of state money on those roads, and we can only do so if it's a town way, if it's a public way. And the way we prove that is by finding the record of the vote of town meeting where it was accepted and laid out as a public way. And there are a lot of such roads in Littleton that we don't have the town meeting records for. So, including Foster Street. So where the state has earmarked $3.6 million for roadway improvements from Taylor to to Balsam Lane, and where we are looking to expand the scope of that assistance to go all the way to Harwood. We have had engineering plans done for Taylor Street, past the commuter rail station and on down to the intersection of Harwood. And just as we did with New Estate Road and Nagog Hill Road, the way that we show the layout of the street on this plan is for the engineers and the surveyors to take all of the plans of the abutting properties, which each and every one of them shows where the road is. And so we've essentially just created a mosaic of where all those private plans from every property that abuts Foster Street, that's where we're putting the line. We're putting the line where we think it is based on the deeds for the abutting property owners. So we would have town, and without taking this step, we frankly could not convince the state to give us the $3.6 million to upgrade the road. So the selectmen will have a road layout hearing on 2 weeks from tonight. We sent out notices to each and every abutter, along with a copy of the map and a cover letter explaining what this is all about. And so we'll have a hearing 2 weeks from tonight. And we'd also appreciate a planning board recommendation on the proposed layout, and we did get that for New Estate and Nagog.
Keith, I recognize you're not Chris, but, and I could wait 2 weeks to ask the question, but two things come to mind. I know in at least one earlier ituration that had floated around, there was a concept of a traffic
Around it,
circle
yeah.
at Harwood and
Yeah.
to have,
I
in
don't see
Foster.
where we can do that
Well,
here.
good.
Because it
good.
ends at Harwood.
That's a
Yeah.
bad idea, but in my mind, anyway, just.
Why you're so hard on a traffic circle?
Well, it's just, this is a historic, and that's the other point, is this is a historic, one of the oldest roads in town, and while it's in the state's interest to encourage heavier traffic flow through there, I'm not sure that's in the residential interest of Littleton. I think we would rather see them go up to Taylor Street and get on the highways up there. But, so my other question was, do we have a sense yet, and I couldn't get it from looking at the plans, of how much wider this road would be compared to how it is now?
Not a bit.
Not a bit? Good.
Not a bit. It would be the road layout. We cannot make, well, I'll say, we cannot make that determination based on this plan.
Yeah.
It may, where the pavement width ends compared to where the property line is, may change. I mean, the property line is where it is. The pavement, the edge of the pavement may or may not come right up to the property line. We don't superimpose where is the pavement here. This is just where's the right-of-way. So there might be some, once we get to the design phase, we'll see if there are impacts.
Well, I'll say this, I was skeptical, prudently skeptical when the New State Road was at this stage, but it worked out very well. I'd say it was way over-engineered, but let's, water over the dam. And then I would, if Nagog Hill is another comparable that I think came through very, very much to the satisfaction of everybody uses it and abuts it, so, we have a good track record on that.
And as we go forward with the design plans for the reconstruction job, there will be numerous meetings with the affected abutters in the coming, I'd say frankly, years, because it'll be a while before we can do this.
Okay. Fred?
I support Paul's point, not making Harwood and Foster Street look like Cleveland Circle, but is there any consideration to making it a four-way stop? And it's...
Historically, we've gone down that road before. The Mass Highway Department just, the state just says, no, you can't do it, right? Keith, is that
Well,
kind of it?
in our own police, maybe we should defer to our,
Well, but what's different
Chief.
now is when the trains let out, you take your life in your hands crossing that intersection. And you can put speed bumps in as they come around the corner or something to slow them down, but it is becoming an issue. So I just, if we're gonna reconstruct the road, then maybe that's an opportunity to look at.
I don't know
it
if
as
either
well.
Chief Bernard or Deputy Chief Patterson have any expertise yet on that part of your work?
Yeah, the line of sight coming down off the hill,
Yes.
for having a stop sign at the bottom of it, and inclement weather, is not gonna warrant a stop sign at the bottom there. the speeds that come around there. We're working on enforcement up in that area very heavily right now. So it's an ongoing issue, I understand that, but we'll be working on it.
Well, don't pave that section to the point. Slow them down.
Yeah, I wouldn't give up on that just yet, Fred. There's gotta be a way. If we're working in partnership with the state on this, then this is an opportunity to get that back on the table again. Yeah, yeah. I do think that's a logical way to approach it, but they just don't like doing that in the state, right? I mean,
I talked to Jimmy Clyde before when we were out there doing a site visit, and he said there was a four-way stop sign there a while back.
we put them up, kind of to flout the law, but they took them down later.
It actually became a serious issue with accidents. So.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Input on this?
No, I mean, I think the emphasis here is that this is really just an administrative step.
Right. It's a good
It
first
has
step.
nothing to do with future design or layouts, it's just an administrative
Good
step.
time to lay out your markers, though.
Right. I like the traffic circle idea.
2 to 3, let's go. Traffic circle.
We'll put one down in your name.
I take all that back, this is a design meeting.
Wow.
No, it's a good first step.
Cleveland Circle, that's what she wants to see up there,
It'll be the
right?
big campaign issue in the next couple of years.
Commissioner Carr, did you have something you wanted to
I
add?
just wanted to point out, I believe the.
By the way, you introduced yourself, I only half introduced you.
Yeah, Jim Carr, 12 Elizabeth. The Municipal Modernization Act, I believe, gives the
Speed limits.
authority now to local, municipalities to do speed limits, stop signs, and all that, so.
Speed limits, I was aware, stop signs, I'm not
Speed
sure.
limits, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do a speed limit, I'm not sure we could get away with the stop signs, but we will explore that.
We'll explore it.
I believe so,
Okay.
but just to answer, I think Fred's question, I believe that Modernization Act gives the ability.
Okay, well, it's worth looking into,
Yeah,
thank you.
certainly, yeah.
All right, any other points out there, folks, on this piece? All right, there'll be much more to come on that as well. Traffic signals, Keith.
Traffic signals, let me go ahead to that.
Oh, yeah.
This is for, and I don't have a plan, but I do have the cost estimate to show you, and this is for the Littleton High School, King Street intersection. And the cost estimate we have from Mass DOT District 3 is $201,000 for the permanent improvement
In front of the high school.
in front of the high school, and just of a set of phased traffic signal. Now, just by comparison, we've had a temporary set of signals, so-called, at Air Road, Bruce Street, and Willow Road, which cost the state $300,000 as the temporary fix, just putting the lights up. But in that case, the permanent fix will involve actually realignment of the intersection and a lot of improvements that will add up to $3 million. We've been assured from MassDOT District 3 that the cost of this set of lights, the permanent fix, will be closer to $200,000, might even be lower, but we want to use the higher figure. MassDOT, as we've discussed before, is the entity that gives permission, that issues permits for any traffic signals that are on a state road, and this is Route 2A, 110, and we need to get their permission to install the lights there. Up till now, over the last 4 years, they have withheld that approval. The Worcester office is recommending to the state level that it be approved. They are not prepared, unlike the Air Willow Bruce intersection, they're not prepared to pay for the cost, but rather would support the town coming up with the money as an indication of how important the town sees this intersection. So it's been a joint effort of our state legislators, this board, the school committee, and our public safety and public works staff to get this far.
Worth in some to note that bureaucratically, the deck was kind of stacked against us, trying to satisfy their needs. So we were very happy with the result they gave us, and it was their offer to say, hey, if you really want to see this thing happen sooner rather than later, then absorb the cost.
They have guidelines that are called a warrant analysis. There are 8 categories, there are 8 warrants that they look at, and you have to meet a minimum number. And this one actually didn't meet the cookie cutter minimum number, but it was the specific pitch that the town made, that there are certain types of day where it's times of day where it's very busy, when school, starts and lets out, that the drivers include some brand-new drivers, and which present old sets of issues, and they were convinced from the argument that was made, the pitch, that this should be approved. So
I'll just want to make 2 more points, and then I'm sure if Chase, you want to, well, go right ahead.
Well, I guess I'm concerned about putting this on the warrant, to be perfectly honest. I understand the desire to put it there, I understand the basis for it, but the fact that it meets none of the DOT warrants, and furthermore, because of that, we haven't looked at what this will do upstream and downstream of that traffic light. I don't know what kind of problem we're fixing here and creating elsewhere. And until we know what we're fixing here and creating elsewhere, there's no way to say that this is an improvement. Certainly qualitatively, it makes sense that we want to control traffic at a place where inexperienced drivers are coming out. But what we don't want to do is then create high-speed collisions at the interchange with 495. So until we know that, I don't think it makes sense to put this on the warrant. And the fact that it doesn't meet a single one of the DOT's
But they
articles
still
is
had, they still found a rationale for supporting it legitimately.
based on the town's lobbying for it. And there's no technical basis for it in their opinion.
Well, okay, score 1 for common sense over
But
technicalities.
it's not common sense. Until we understand what this does elsewhere, it's simply addressing a problem in front of us and taking a serious risk of creating a problem someplace else.
All right.
Either New Estate Road, up by the gas station, or 495, those could be major problems.
Oh, already are, if you live it daily, yeah, I know. I mean, look, I think there's merit to what you say. I don't personally think that that's reason to put the brakes on this project.
I thought it met some of the requirements.
It
I
didn't
thought-
meet the minimum number, but it did meet some of the
it did
warrants. I
meet
think
some
you
of
have
the
to meet
warrants.
3, and we met 2.
Right, it was
but-
pretty close.
And
Okay,
they have different levels of warrants, and it didn't meet the threshold criteria
Right.
to go forward.
And, yeah, and I'm not discounting your comments, Chase, whatsoever. I do understand your concerns, but I do also understand the concerns of that intersection, having driven 3 kids in and out of the high school many times, and being caught in the traffic that is created just by people sitting there waiting to pull out in and out of that intersection. I think it might not fit the exact requirements that the state's mandated, but the state isn't living in Littleton and dealing with that intersection.
Oh, and you're not going
know,
to get a
and-
debate from me that there are challenges at that intersection. And
Right.
if I knew that this was going to improve the safety there without detracting from the safety elsewhere, I would be all for it.
Right.
But no one can say that. No one can say that.
And I don't know how.
I'll say this,
Any basis.
if the potential ramifications are impacts elsewhere, I'd say, fine, the real solution is a holistic approach to that corridor, essentially from 495 up to Carlton Circle and there, or, as long as you want it. But the reality is, I mean, the state's put on the table and then taken off several different items. They were gonna, at one point, level the hill up by the Middlesex Materials and do something there. They got away from that and did instead the cheaper solution down at the beginning of Air Road with the signalization. There was always talk of having signalization at the on and off ramps at 495 there too, but that got cashiered in instead of doing cheaper solutions up the road. So I don't think we have master control over that whole process, but I do know in that whole context that if we had the ability to impose a from my opinion, a holistic solution from end to end. Somewhere along the line, it would include a signal in front of the high school as part of that. And how that impacts other things, I don't know, but that's a point of primary concern that I would rather see other intersections react to rather than not do anything there.
I think there's a safeguard here. We're not granting ourselves the approval. We're asking for MassDOT to grant us the approval, and it would require MassDOT, and we don't have a set of design plans that we're looking at now. There are 25% design plans that MassDOT is working on that they will hand off to us for the permitting. We will have to bring it to 100%. And there'll be a design process that will bring it up to some level, and which will, and ultimately MassDOT is the one, not us, that issues the permit of whether this goes ahead or not. And so what does that configuration look like? What are the other impacts? MassDOT is on the hook for those answers even more than we are, because it's their road.
And I completely understand that, and I'm glad we're doing that, which is my basis for saying that I don't believe that this belongs on the warrant right now until we can answer those questions for the public.
Well-
And we're talking about spending, $200,000 of the town's money with
Right.
uncertain outcome.
I'll say this, for those of us that are sold on its merit, putting it on the warrant now prospectively allows us the opportunity, since we're funding, if the state approval process, if I remember correctly, Keith, through the winter takes its usual course, we could essentially go out to bid in the spring and build it next summer? Was that the?
I think that Chris said it was going to be in the 2019 construction season.
Okay, so that's,
Yeah.
the impetus for us doing it now and swallowing 200,000 rather than asking the state for it is predicated on the assumption that we support the project. I get you, Chase, that, if you've got questions about its merit right from that point, that's a whole other field of battle. But why now? Now allows us, if you're on board, to prospectively see this problem solved before next year's opening of schools. But I see some interested folks in the audience. I'd like to get around. Yes?
This is Sabota, North Bay Road. My only concern is I 100% agree with keeping them safe at the school, but while those kids are being safe at that school, my kids are trying to get on the school bus, and they're cutting through, they're taking left-hand turns where they're not supposed to be. They're flying up the other way, and that just concerns me. So whether there's a police presence on New Estate Road or some other way to keep them safe, that has to be done, because they're cutting through that New Estate Road.
Oh, it's happening now.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. We've asked for police presence now, and that's not happening, but they're flying up and down that road way too fast.
Right. Okay. Other folks?
A couple comments too.
I'll try to get people from not on New Estate Road too. I'm not being biased here.
No, and I-
Calling out my
We're all
neighbors.
here, sorry.
So I'm also not here to debate whether the signal at the high school is gonna keep people safe. I walk down through there and try to cross my kids. It's a nightmare. I can't imagine trying to be a new driver taking a left. I actually learned that I can squeal the tires on my minivan taking a left out of New Estate, which I never, thought was a possibility. It's a tough spot. There's a lot of traffic. We have a double yellow line now. People are actually going, especially commercial, are actually going faster. My concern is, so recently we had some gas line work, and so that caused some massive backups. And so that for me is the litmus test for what an actual stoplight there is going to do to our road, and it made it a racetrack. My bus stop has 10 Shaker Lane kids. We had cars threading the needle between our bus and 10 Shaker Lane kids, younger siblings, and like almost a dozen parents, just like literally threading the needle. Our road is narrow, as I think you guys already know. People don't care, this is what we do, and I think that was one of the days where several of us called the police to request, and they did come out for enforcement, but I am concerned that a light here is going to create this situation every single day during the really busy times, which are, the first bus comes at 6:30, the last bus is at 8:06, at least at the middle of New Estate and Sleigh Ride. And this is when Distribution Circle, I think it's great that we have more businesses there, but the fact of the matter is, You know, there are absolutely people who are not local, who are cutting through. And I get it, it's a road, you can drive on it, we can't forbid people from driving on a road. However, our road is really becoming a racetrack. And the solutions that, you know, and I commend the town for attempting to put some solutions forth, such as the double yellow, the, you know, traffic calming, it's not working. And my fear is, you know, so when this construction occurs, traffic backs all the way up to 495, people can't get off of 495, and so I see this happening every single day now instead of just when there's construction. And so I think, you know, a light at the high school is, you know, appears to be warranted from a safety standpoint, but there are absolutely critical upstream impacts that need to be addressed sooner than later. And I would really like to request, I contacted Jim Clyde and Chris Stoddard to ask them if they had looked at anything as far as the impact on 495 or other traffic in the area. I mean, we might get a senior residential development next to Minor Court, so the traffic's not going to be reduced. And you know, the distribution circle area is a place where we're trying to encourage commercial development. We're not going to get less traffic. And so I'd like to request that, you know, I see the need for this light and I see the need to make this intersection safe, but I think there are some really imminent issues upstream from it.
To supplement that, I think if Joe were here, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he would tell you the same thing with respect to Bruce Street, that there's a lot of folks cutting around that area via Bruce as well. And so that ultimately goes to my broader concern about what are the upstream and downstream impacts here. And I think it is bigger than just New Estate Road.
Yeah, but Chuck would say, you know, let's do it.
No, that's fine. I hear it.
Does Chuck live on New Estate?
Chuck's nowhere near us.
Okay, I was just curious.
I do, I need it. Ed?
Ed Mullen, 10 Grist Mill Road. Just a thought, so I have a son who attends the high school, and I have two more that will be attending that high school. And so I've done drop-off and pick-up. I've also seen high school kids pulling in and out of there. My opinion would be the traffic light would make it safer for the children coming in and out. I'm not sure what it'll do up and downstream. But if we were to put a no-through traffic sign on New Estate Road and let only residents pull in and out of there, could we then open up the gate and allow the high school kids to go down New Estate Road?
They had a permit because they were accessing the school, I suppose they could, yeah.
Well, I mean, it'd be less traffic than the people, it wouldn't be residents, it would be residents using the road and not non-residents using the road.
I'm not sure that's ever been explored, but it's doable, I believe.
Well, you know, the juxtaposed positions, right? We gotta balance everything for everybody.
Yeah.
We can't take care of just the people on New Estate Road, we have to take care of the town.
Understand. Chief Bernard?
I believe during the design phase of the high school, that was thought about in having that entrance for the school traffic going in and out, but it was fought against by the residents of North State Road, not to be used, and only be used as emergency access. That's why it's like that.
Okay, ma'am?
Brittany Corey, 160 North State Road. The gate being open, the same traffic would still come up. They would just go to the gate, so the people on that end of New Estate would be affected by the same, by the same cut-through traffic. It just wouldn't make it up to our road, all the way up. Yeah.
I'm just trying to say that we have to do something for the kids that are pulling in and out of the school, we have to make it safe.
Yeah, right.
Nobody
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we agree. Just make a plan for New Estate when you do that.
I definitely think there should be a no through and not a through street sign somewhere on New Estate that keeps them
Yeah.
from ripping.
No left turn.
Something.
Okay, ma'am?
Jess Cameron, New Estate. So yeah, I'd like to echo everything they said, like that none of us want there to not be a plan for a light there, because I think we all recognize that that's very necessary. Something has to be done for that spot. I think we all just want to request that it's, other areas, yes, including New Estate, but certainly Bruce Street. I know people who live on Bruce Street who say the same exact thing, that it's a cut through and it's become a raceway and whatever. So I think in general, all the areas that are affected need to be considered, and I would love to just see evidence that will, that these areas will be taken care of if this goes forward. And again, nobody is saying we shouldn't do it at all.
Well, I think some folks did, so
Well,
in
I think
fairness.
of us here that are representing and speaking up, I think that was what I
Okay.
mean.
This is great input. Some of it has surprised me. I thought that on the specific point, we hadn't previously encountered, opposition, but it's food for thought. This is not the hearing for that. There will be a hearing, right, Keith?
Well,
Well,
not
they
between,
wouldn't,
not
not
between
on
now and
the
October
funding
29th.
phase, but just on the overall implementation. All right, I don't think.
We'll certainly have answers, I mean, all the issues that have been raised tonight, we're on notice of, and we'll
Yeah,
make sure that
yeah.
the presentation we bring to town meeting, assuming there are the votes to put it on the warrant to begin with,
Right.
will be addressed.
Okay.
And
Yes,
and
sir.
we'll have a couple of selectmen's meetings between now and then, where we can give you updates on those.
Sir?
Bruce Jurgens, Newstate Road. What kind of information or evidence can we provide? Because I think that there's, all the residents, or many of the residents I knew, would be willing to research and provide some information to help highlight this even more than presence at a Board of Selectmen meeting. Because
Well, maybe as a start, we could provide you with some of the information that we had to get to the state, to get them to Mass Highway, to get them to consider and agree to it. If you saw what their criteria is, maybe that, can prompt you to, come up with data that supports that area. So maybe we can share with them some.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm looking at their data right now, though, and the fundamental problem is that their data is specific to that.
Yeah, but I'm thinking more the verbiage that supports the various criteria, so that you can try to apply that same sort of modeling to a different road. I'm not sure if that, at least it would give you a sense of the, what's in the air when Mass Highway's making their determinations. Now, New Estate Road is not a state road, so that's just, town, we have a lot more latitude of what we can do there. And I would also, I know he's been listening to every piece of this, maybe Chief Pinard at some point can weigh in on some thoughts about what we might want to consider globally for the whole corridor and how it impacts some of the roads that are being used as, escape from 110.
Right.
Believe me, I live it too. I'll tell you,
Right.
The lights, when you're coming out on the other end of New Estate, from where you are, Kristen, on my end, I wait for the light to kick in down at the gas station, because I know that'll at least create an opening for a short period of time. That's not ideal way to live, but, okay.
Those legitimate concerns, I appreciate you coming forward and bringing it to our attention.
Yep.
So-
Okay.
And we can try, I think it's a reasonable, more than reasonable for us to try to get from MassDOT District 3 what additional information they can provide about the surrounding intersections. That, we're focusing on one, what's their plan? Share with us what their long-term plan is for the whole corridor.
And then maybe even more local is what can we do on New Estate Road that deals with that one direct problem or one impact?
Yeah, that's actually something I've been wondering, and I apologize for dragging this out further, but
No,
is,
fine.
having a sign that says residents only or whatnot. Like, I've heard lots of different things that people have asked about it, and it was shot down, and I would love to know more about that, why that's not an option, or maybe if it is.
Yeah, I
an
mean,
option,
no through traffic. I mean, look, I drive my dad to a facility in Groton every day, and there's a nice road I can take, Broadmeadow Road, to avoid the downtown area to get him over where he needs to be in West Groton, but I can't take it because it says no through traffic.
Right.
Okay, so it can be done, It sends me where the bigger range of traffic has been, directed because it's built to support it, so, yeah.
Just one final comment. I think a lot of, like, the Waze effect has impacted a lot of towns and a lot of residential roads, and maybe we could learn something from some other towns.
Certainly, some municipalities are petitioning Google Maps, Waze, et cetera, to remove certain routes from their mapping systems.
Yeah, or like Carlisle and Bedford have roads where you, like, no
Right.
turns between certain times of day.
Yeah.
That type of thing, so.
You're right, though, that, I've been in Hudson a number of times that it tries to send me down this road that says residents only, and GPS sends you down there. I'm sure the same thing would happen.
All right.
So Keith, if we're enumerating concerns here, I want to lay out my single biggest concern is, and that is that a light here will potentially back traffic up to the point where people can't get off 495, which will then in turn back traffic up on 495.
It
And-
will, because we've seen it.
Exactly. And so, low-speed crashes at 25 miles an hour create a mess. High-speed crashes, in rush hour, kill people. So I'd really like to understand
Okay.
the cascading effects all the way down through 495.
We'll follow these up.
Excellent input, but I'm not sure we can add too much more value to it at this point tonight. So, moving right along. Transfer 74 Whitcomb Avenue from the highway to water departments. And do you want to set this up, Keith? And I know we have water commissioners here as well. Nick, by the way, congratulations. I think this is your first visit to us since you've been named as head of the Lights and Water Department. We have great faith that you're going to continue what has been a terrific management of that combined departments for decades.
Thanks, that's the plan.
Yeah.
And so, just to bring us to where we are, town meeting last May approved a $7 million project for a new well field on Whitcomb Ave, and as sort of a follow-up to that, Water Department is in the process of treatment plant. Yeah, treatment. I'm sorry. Is looking to design and bid the facility, and there are some issues arising from that which are causing them to look at the property. The property in question is 74 Whitcomb Ave, which is surrounded by Water Department property, so.
Right, so, yeah, in fall town meeting, we got the borrowing authorization for this project, which was two-part. It was to increase the well capacity. It was permitted for 600 gallons per minute, but we can only get about 400 gallons per minute out of the aging infrastructure there. So that was object one, to meet the demands that were growing in the town. And object two of the project was to get all of our water in town now treated and filtered. It's all treated now, but all the water will be filtered. So that should help us with our water quality for all residents in town. About 50% of that water comes from this site right now.
Really? Yeah.
So, as we're going through the design, there's a parcel of land that's under highway department control, and is surrounded by the water department parcel. For ease of design and construction, it'd be very helpful to have that parcel. The parcel is somewhat useless, because it's in Zone 1 of the Water Management Act. So, there's not much you can do with it anyway. It does have an old highway garage on there that's currently being utilized for storage.
That seems to be, or has been, the bigger issue over the past month or so from our side of the table is, what do we do with that stuff?
Sure.
Now, wasn't decommissioning that a component of what we passed at the last town meeting?
Yep.
For the well improvement?
Yeah, it wasn't part of the town meeting vote, but we had always assumed that we were going to take control of this land, and in that budget was knocking that building down.
Okay.
That building doesn't have electricity to it. There's a lot of issues with that building. We had time bond, our consultants go in there. They're gonna do a report on that, and we'll get that over to Keith and you guys as soon as it's done. But that building's got some serious issues.
I believe the building was condemned years ago, to be quite honest with you. I mean, that's how bad it is.
Yeah, it well might have been. I know one of the issues that the highway department has is the timing. They use the building even in its dilapidated structure, status for storage, equipment storage. And so one of the issues that we talked to Nick about is to how we can help accomplish his immediate goal of getting control of the site, so that when you put the thing out to bid in the spring, that you can say that you've got
So
control.
we're going out to bid hopefully, 1st of March.
Yeah.
And it's a real tight schedule because we're trying to get online by May of 2020. That's when we start forecasting demands being an issue.
And so among the things we talked about is either, some temporary, and I'm aware, or I'm told, that the Space Needs Committee is looking at storage space along with office space. And if so, there may be some longer-term solutions, but in the short term,
So I met
we
with.
need to get the stuff out of here and find
I
somewhere
met with
else.
Chris Stoddard and Jim Clyde today. It's hard to say how much of that building they're actually utilizing. It seems like it's around 1,800 square feet. Don't quote me on that number.
Yeah.
We have about 2,000 square feet under wings, on the side of our operations building, that we can give them temporary. we utilize that space, but we obviously understand that we're putting them in a tough bind. So we could give them temporary use of that area. They keep plows in there, dump bodies. I think during the seasons they rotate. I think mowers go in there in the winter and so forth. But, we're obviously willing to work with highway department as far as temporary storage until the more permanent solutions come along.
And the text of the article, well, first off, because the property is held here, care, custody, and control of the Selectmen and Highway Department, this board has to vote at some point to declare it surplus in order for it to go anywhere else. And it's yours until you say you don't want it. And so what we've crafted, with town council's help, crafted a town meeting article which authorizes town meeting to transfer it to the water department, but the timing of that transfer would be subject to when the selectmen declare it a surplus. So if it takes us a few months to figure out what's the solution, then we can do that. In the event that we can't figure it out between now and October 29th, we don't wanna stop the water department from doing what they need to do to protect the town's potable water supply.
Anything further to your presentation? Is it straightforward as that? 'Cause I know board members might have questions or comments as well as,
I think that's the gist. I mean, we'll answer any questions you might have.
as long as you can help us find a home in the short term for the items that are there.
In the long term.
Yeah, long term too. Short term, certainly. Well, short term is undefined, so that's,
Yeah, I mean, it would be my hope that in your FY '20 budget, you have a plan to put it somewhere. And we understand FY '19's closed, and we can store it, for that time period, but at some point.
You think that quick? Yeah. Well, how long have you been around here?
Yeah, it'll be in our way,
Yeah.
so it'd be nice for it to be.
Well,
short.
Let's not lose sight that, this is a great project for the town and
Of
the
course,
folks.
of
I mean,
course, yeah,
This is a water project and.
And frankly, taking care of this building is a huge
Outstanding.
benefit
Absolutely.
to the town as a
Well,
whole.
look, I'm
Absolutely.
my
The only
oldest,
reason we haven't done it among many is that we didn't have the money, and we've got the money in the budget.
this is an impetus to do something we probably should have done as a town long ago. Cindy, do you have any questions?
Sure, well, I can just comment about temporary storage space on behalf of the Space Needs Working Group Committee. We are looking at properties on Air Road. It came up during our last meeting, and I was going to save this for member updates, about renting space is maybe solving some of our short-term, possibly long-term space needs for some of the town departments, and it came to our attention that there was need for this equipment to be stored for the highway department, and there is a space on Air Road that we've been in contact with the Realtor for that might accommodate the highway department and that equipment in some respects, so it is on our radar and something that we are looking at.
Okay.
So we'll pursue that, and we'll just definitely keep you in the loop.
I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, Chase, did you have any questions?
My only concern is that Chris isn't here to see him nod and give us his approval. Anthony or Keith, have you guys spoken to Chris about this? Is he confident enough that?
He had serious concerns, which I have not had further conversation with him since those. We addressed them in having him meet with Nick and in rewriting the article to put the timing in the hands of the selectmen. So you decide when the transition occurs.
And maybe this is as good a time as any to offer, and this is true of all the articles we're considering tonight. If we've had, as we have in a few cases, some concerns raised, if we put things on the agenda tonight, we have the opportunity to take them off later. If we don't put them on tonight, we don't have the opportunity to put them on later. Correct, Keith?
Right, yeah, the warrant closes between now and the board's next meeting. So, I mean, Chuck DeCoste had
Right.
specifically
And that's what I
asked that
specifically
this article
promised him
not
as
be
an
on tonight's agenda because he had issues he wanted to discuss. And our resolution was, well, we need to put it on the agenda, and if you want to discuss it at the next meeting, we can do that.
Right.
But this is the opportunity to put it before the voters.
Yeah, I spoke to Chuck over the weekend
Okay.
about this too, and he had no issue with getting it on the warrant.
Yeah.
And his concerns is essentially what you guys said, hey, temporarily, can you get that equipment out and put it somewhere? And I think we solved that issue. That's it, and he wanted to, just essentially say that.
Now, Nick, I just want to look for a historical example of what temporary can mean. The MBTA, when they moved the train station from Littleton Depot to Foster Street in 1973, that was temporary, okay? Okay, so help us find a temporary
Yeah,
solution.
when they built the Red Line and it only went as far as Harvard Station in 1912, that was the temporary terminus of the Red Line. It took till 1978 to move to Alewife. So.
I got a different definition.
That's good, actually.
Good place for a dialogue. Okay.
That's why we hired him.
Yes, members of the audience, any input on this topic? Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
All right, Public Works, smart sewer design. We have Corey Rapucci and Kent as well from
And we have the-
Weston and Sampson. Chase and I are here as well as from our working group, and, well, let's see, a lot of folks here that are in the working group. Nick, who just left, and Keith and Anthony. I did follow up from that and made a couple of the, or asked these folks to make changes, just per what we talked about in terms of reorienting the costs, so we can lead off at the highest line and those kind of things, just so if you see something that's a little bit different.
Advances.
Forward.
I think we're actually gonna go to Peabody or do a Skype thing with their design person, tomorrow morning to hammer out last points on the other things, so I'll float you a draft of that as soon as we got one. I'm sorry, Kent, to be talking offline here. It's been a few months since we had you in to give a presentation on the smart sewer project, and since we're anticipating an article for funding the design of the project for the October 29th town meeting, and there's been a lot of other activity as well on the project. I guess it's a good time to get an update.
So, absolutely, Paul, you and Chase and many of the other folks know, even though the public hasn't seen much of the project, it has been extremely active in a number of ways. The good news for people trying to understand the project is, really, we've tried to keep the project essentially the same throughout. What we've been doing is trying to improve a lot of the aspects of it, the buy-in, and in particular, the financials, to make sure that we're very comfortable with what it is. So just a reminder of the areas that were in here, and I'll just go over the color coding real quick on this. At one point, we decided that all the colored parcels that you see here would be part of the equation. There are a few parcels that you'll see that were hatched out. We have identified those because they were parcels who have initially opted out of the equation. As we've talked about in the past, the concept of allowing folks to opt in and opt out of the project remains a major component. That does not mean that the parcels that are hatched out right now are completely out of the equation. It just means that right now we expect that they'll opt out. So we haven't counted on them for the financing plan to date. Otherwise, you'll note that, the primary focus here is the common down King Street and Great Road, the two main pieces. And you'll note off to the left of this, the high school parcel in green and the LELWD and highway parcel in light blue are both part of the equation when we look into the project area. So one thing we've been very active with is pursuing funding. We expect that this project, like many others, but in particular, will rely heavily on trying to get some grant and loan agencies to buy into the importance, the physical importance of a smart sewer concept, and support the program therefore. So we've done a few things. One is we submitted into Mass DEP an SRF application. One of the things that just came about this year since we last spoke was the state revolving fund that provides loan funding, low-interest loan funding, typically 2% loans, for projects like this, wastewater projects, has made a special commitment to housing choice communities to drop that interest rate to 1.5%, which is really good news for Littleton, because Littleton has made the commitment to be a housing choice community. So one way that you've really paid yourself back with some of those decisions.
I actually had a question for you, and it seems like something I should have asked earlier. Is that 1.5% indexed to anything, or is that 1.5% by statute? So,
No, believe it or not, it actually was interesting. The state, many years ago, when they first underwrote the program, decided in Massachusetts to fix the state revolving fund program at a 2% loan rate. Many other states indexed it to, most of the states chose something like 1/3 to 40% off the financing amount.
Okay.
And it would index based on what your actual loan rate was. What happened when the interest rates actually dropped out in past years, and a lot of towns were able to borrow even below 3%.
Yeah, right. A year and a half ago, when we were talking about this,
Yeah.
we looked at the SRF. It's
Not- wasn't a good
Not
deal.
anymore,
Yeah,
things have
right,
changed
Right,
now.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Now
And
as
that's
you
why I
see-
wanted to know now if it's
2%
indexed.
looks good these
Yeah,
days.
right.
Now as you see it curving back upwards towards 5% again. 2 is great, 1.5% is really
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
No,
And
it's-
they have the right, the state has the right to change the program over time, but.
But they
over-
haven't,
Over
right?
2 decades
Well,
plus of the program,
It is-
they haven't
yeah,
changed it.
It was, I got 0% SRF, but that was 15, 20 years ago.
You're just bragging.
So, well, yeah.
I would
We passed
suggest.
it on to property owners, that we charge them principal only and no interest for 20 years, so.
And I would suggest we'll continue to keep our eye on the funding programs if there are any other leveraging, but this was really good news for us. The second piece of this, obviously, is we just submitted this application. We expect to be listed. We won't hear back on that until early 2019, usually January. We'll have that information back.
Back to that SRF real quick. What,
Yep.
at one point you had answered this question. What's that 0.5% worth to us in terms of actual
Uh,
capital today?
I think I
$500,000
roughed
or
it in,
something?
it was closer to $1 million. It's,
Okay.
remember, it's a 0.5%, but it's also the whole project, and it's each year for the whole life of the cycle, so it's 20 years. So it's not like it's a 0.5% of the project, it's a 0.5% of the project averaged down to the end of a 20-year period.
So it's a big chunk of change.
And in our case, it's more than 20 years because we're spreading our implementation out. So I think our total finance period is like 26 years for the project with our phasing. It's a good number. It's actually a very helpful number to you. So the second thing we submitted this year was the MassWorks grant application, which in this case we've asked for, we bumped that ask to $3 million, which is something that was a little higher than what was previously in our financial plan. One of the main reasons we submitted the MassWorks application, and again, just for information purposes, the MassWorks application linked heavily to economic development, and therefore this is a big part of the concept of the Smart Sewer program, particularly for the common area. This is something we really want to emphasize. One of the reasons we wanted to push that forward was because it's one of the ways we hope to realize some of the funding on the project. The environmental bond bill passed by the Mass Legislature this year had actually earmarked $6 million for the Smart Sewer project, thanks to your local senator, which was great. But we really need to keep our eye on individual programs to manifest that, because that funding, when it gets earmarked, doesn't necessarily come with somebody writing you a check. We have to actually pursue it. So the MassWorks may end up being one of the ways that we pursue that. We'll, again, push for as much funding as we can. One of the nice things to say about the MassWorks funding application that we did was we had a really nice, we've done quite a few of these for clients. You had a really nice set of support letters that came in. Anthony did a lot of legwork himself to come in and collect a lot of funding support letters on this, and it really was a nice, very nice adder to the package.
It was an essential ingredient for just showing what the groundswell of support there was. I know the Littleton Business Association, James Kennedy was very busy out there getting letters, and we got a lot in, and it was heartening to see that much.
My senior guy who has done this funding for 40 years actually remarked to me when he saw the letter, he was amazed because each letter was individual.
Right.
I mean, when you sent them to us, we were thinking we were going to get a form letter that a bunch of people just took the time to sign on and send them along, and it would look like it was a really nice representation of how different yet valuable people see the project in the project area, which is a fairly unique thing for a project like this, and a really good thing for you folks to feel good about the project with.
And just, it's probably an appropriate time to mention that since we talked about the SRF, or we talked about the MassWorks funding, we talked about the earmark, and that one of the things that we're doing is following up on what Secretary Jay Ash recommended to us, but when he met with the full board back in July, which is to have our team set up a meeting with his team, with Jay Ash's team, and with Secretary Beaton's team, and that's scheduled now for October 4th in Boston, so that we can get a much better sense of what sort of funding can we reasonably hope to get from the state, and just as importantly, when might we get that funding?
For those who may not understand, the difference is Secretary Ash and Secretary of essentially the economic development piece,
Right.
and has been working with us, but this money from the bond bill perspective, it wouldn't come out of his budget, it would come out of
Someone
Secretary
else's.
Beaton's budget, and he's Secretary of Environment and Energy.
That's right, yeah, it's all inside baseball. Secretary Ash is the Mass Works guy, and Secretary Beaton is the earmark guy, so.
And in terms of, one thing I want to make sort of clear to the public, and certainly correct me if I'm off base here, as far as handicapping the MassWorks grant, we were able to put together a good application, but it tends to favor shovel-ready projects. Is
Yep.
that a fair characterization?
Yeah,
So
timing
we're
is-
not certain about that
Right.
funding, right?
Yeah, essentially, timing is always tricky for these. I will say right now, if we were successful in town meeting in the fall, you'll be right on schedule for the timing that would go normally with the state revolving fund. MassWorks, you kind of fall in between because of the way the MassWorks funding just works normally. It's an odd
But it also is
it's an
not
odd
unusual
program.
to file in multiple years. If you don't get it first bang, you can go
So
after it.
we are both, honestly, both very hopeful that we might have them really look and, you know, just say, wow, this is just a great project, and with the strength of what we gave to support, really push it, and then we'll cooperate with them in making it work with the schedule. The second alternative is we'll push the application out again next year. It's just the way the state sets a schedule, and every year they do them at a certain time.
So to not
Some
get the
programs are
MassWorks
rolling.
approval would be disappointing, but something that we intend to come back to in a year.
Absolutely, we would come back on it next year. Yep, and I think we would be, if nothing else, better suited to get it next year, even if we don't hear back.
And one of the most important things is we want to make sure that we've got up-to-the-minute information to be able to share with the voters on October 29th when we're asking for borrowing authority to start the design process. We need to have a master strategy of when do we think we're going to get state funding to help defray the cost of the
Of course,
construction of it.
one of the biggest considerations happens the following week. We either continue working with our established relationships, or we follow up
new
on
friends.
Senator Eldridge's good graces and working with the new administration. Not predicting or,
So the last one I just want to mention really quickly here was the Water Management Act grant. We had prepared this last year, but after coordination with LELWD folks, they had already made a partnership with Westford on a Water Management Act grant, which was very promising, and they didn't, in fact, get. So we pulled this back, but we actually want to apply this this fall. That program is just about to be listed. They're probably a week away from posting it, and the applications usually go in early October. We'll coordinate with LELWD again and expect to file a grant application. I think we identified that to be, $40,000 to $60,000 last year, and that's probably the same range we'll try to deal with this year. The key on this one is we're still continuing to turn as many stones as we can for financing. And we have our eye on a few other programs as well that are out there. There's going to be some additional money that'll kick up. We have some sense that some energy money might be appropriate, but I think the next steps will be to go back after these applications and pursue this question with Secretary Beaton.
and we haven't even talked about potential for federal funds that might, there's a lot of
Yep.
talk about federal infrastructure money happening after the first of the year.
And we just
Depending upon what
secured
happens
some,
there.
we secured some federal EDA money for a recent similar project, so there's a lot of other opportunities coming down the road, and we're gonna continue to keep an eye on that. The key here is that grants and loans will be a very key factor in making the project affordable. So what is the project and how affordable is it? The loans kind of counter with what the costs are, and again, it's not a cheap project. We had talked previously about a project that was going to be as much as $37 million. We kind of brought the scope of that down a little bit, reduced the service area, and actually reduced the size of the quirk for treatment capacity. We now are at 150,000 gallon per day design capacity. Our numbers are now running about 27.4 million. For people with excellent memories, they'll see that number's a little higher than the 26 and change we were running with back in the spring. One thing we've done recently in response to some changes and escalations that we're seeing in the marketplace for this type of construction is we went back and used a construction cost indices adjustment to adjust our budget, which is appropriate. We're now shifting into another year. When we first set that capital budget of 26, the anticipation was we were going to appropriate money potentially for construction this year. and now we're moving into next year. So appropriate adjustment, it was approximately a 5% increase in the capital cost estimated for the job. You'll also see that the grant funding now assumes approximately $6.7 million. We have not assumed 100% of the $6 million on top of the other funding that we've gotten. We've kind of blended it in there. So that $6.7 million actually includes things like the $452,000 that the town's already sunk, which we count in there as kind of sunk costs if we don't go forward. Some state funding that would come through the Chapter 90 program, paving, that Chris has access to anyways. And then obviously things like MassWorks and energy grants and Water Management Act grant and maybe an EDA grant. So the upside is actually a little higher than that, but we've tried to pick a kind of a middle of the road number with the expectation that we'll get most of the $6 million earmarked.
Sure, if we bet 1,000, that could be north of 10 million.
If we, yeah, easily, yeah, right. So the other thing that's important to factor in that we've talked about in the past is that we've kept the quirk in, the full aspects of the quirk, which is really the energy recovery and the resource recovery aspects of this. And as part of that, this all-important idea that we're going to bring food waste and recover it through the anaerobic digestion process and convert it to energy on site is important. And I just want to point out that including balancing this with where we were, we did, in the springtime, we did talk about moving that number back up to 70 tons per week, which we still think is an achievable number for food waste to come in. 70 tons is still only a handful of truckloads, so it's not like it's a ton of trucks moving in and out of the site. Over the course of a week, it seems very doable.
Truck a day?
Yeah,
Truck and change
actually,
a day?
it's kind of like a truck every other day almost. Yeah, it depends. I mean, the frequency will be different, but it's certainly not it's not like a line of trucks. It's a couple of trucks. So, and again, the last thing that factors into this is how many people are being serviced. And, you know, we've been running, the high number was about 230 properties. We're now running with the reduced service area around 180 properties. That's not a really good indicator, so we use the equivalent dwelling units to give that. If everybody was a single-family house, that would mean that we'd have the order of 423 single-family homes here. But as you know, there's schools and commercial developments and office buildings and, you know, the housing property down the road here. So a lot of things kind of factor into how we get it. That's why you see the difference between the 180 and the 423. So the good news is, even after the changes in the upping the capital costs and the changes that we've been through in the shortening of the service area, and as we, I think, explained back in our March meetings, we're able to keep the financing basically the same, with a little bit of increase here and there for folks, as it was presented in our big public meeting that we had very good attendance at back in March. And that's good news because it kind of changes the normal expectation is we'd like to get some information and be able to rely on it. A lot of times with these projects, the numbers start to move around and you get a little bit of lack of confidence. I feel really good that we spent the time to get these numbers to stay relatively in line, so there aren't any major surprises. Even though we've raised the project cost here for escalation, it's still not making the project all of a sudden change in its aspects of affordability, which is really good. So that means that we can talk about those numbers, and this is similar to a table that we presented back in the presentation. And you'll see that we did a couple things here. One is, this is the residential table, and the residential table is presented because it's easier to generate what I talked about, this EDU number, or equivalent dwelling units. So the first thing is the numbers in the table are based on either one, the first middle column is based on one EDU, which is basically a single-family home. The second one would be a two-family or two single-family homes on one lot or something to that nature, you know, a bigger property. So the first line, there's 4 aspects of payments here. There's 5 lines because the bottom line, the asterisk, is an alternate way to pay the first line. But there's basically 4 ways we pay this. One is a betterment assessment. Betterment assessment is an assessment because you have availability of sewer to your property. It actually conveys value back because you now no longer are reliant on on-site septic systems. We've apportioned the anticipated betterment, which has been adjusted to an annual basis with an interest rate that is, I think we've been holding it steady at 0.5% over the total average financing rate the town has. So what that means is we're borrowing it, a lot of the money at that 1.5%, but some of the money we're still borrowing at like 4.5%. So that number, I think,
There's
is
a weighted
averaging.
average
Yeah,
or
it's
something?
averaging a little over 2% is what the things were, but still, anybody that has tried to borrow money for their home knows it's pretty hard to go out and borrow money at 2%. So it's still a pretty advantageous rate. Runs in at about $1,440 a year average over a 20-year period for the apportioned payment. The asterisk dictates the bottom line, which is that 1440 is just an apportionment of a one-time fee of $23,000, and that you have the option of paying it up front. Certainly commercial property sometimes will do that. Sometimes folks will wrap it into their mortgage, find other advantages to it. But one of the nice things of these programs is the municipality usually affords that. You sign on, you don't have to qualify for the credit to apportion, which is really nice. So you got two options to pay the betterment, but you only pay one of those two. Typically, you'll see most folks will elect that $1,440 over 20 years. Second thing is we expect a one-time connection fee. The one-time connection fee is paid upon an actual physical connection to the sewer. If you decide to defer, if we allow folks to defer a few years, you don't pay that until that time when you go to physically connect. Right now, we'll plug that into the financial plan at $1,500 for EDU, little higher for commercial properties, and multifamilies will be that $3,000 or more. The third one, and this is the one that varies the most, is the annual user charges. Folks connected to the sewer will use their water bills to estimate their usage, and using an estimate of their usage, we will actually bill them on actual use. And those numbers are running right around $1,500 plus minus a year.
Now, these are typically constructed so that the user has the option of metering the outgoing wastewater if they so choose.
We
Is that-
generally don't do that
Okay.
because, so the advantage of that is if you have one or two people who do it, it's a good advantage for those folks. If everybody did it, you just change the rate and drive the rate up higher. So what we typically would do is we use a fractional estimate to assume consumptive use. So a lot of times we'll take 80% of the actual water use and bill based on 80% of the water use. And it's, you can do those things if you've got someone who has a very unusual condition. There's a lot of those
Commercial
things.
users who have particular uses or conditions.
A lot of times residential uses with swimming pools that like to fill them a couple times a year or something. But what we usually recommend is deferring those decisions until we get into the actual writing of your local bylaws, because there's a lot of details in those decisions to be made. Either way, you're talking about annual user charges of about $1,300 per year for a single-family home. That's based on actual usage that's less than that 330 gallons per day that you see. That's a kind of a design number. We expect, Corey, half to two-thirds for typical use. So a home might use a couple hundred, 180, 200 gallons per day, and that's what you'd actually build on, what you actually use. So that revenue is significant because it does two things. One, it pays for the operational cost of the project, but two, we also have a little bumper on there which pays for our additional debt service and keeps the betterment low. Our hope is that if we do better with some of the grant funding, that's where we would see the most payback, is having that number come down a little bit, that $1,300 a year, which is nice. And then the last one that we talk about on this chart is there's also a physical cost to homeowners to connect. Typical home still has to run a pipe from the edge of the property line. We'll put it from the street up to the property line, but the town doesn't build on people's individual homes and properties, so we stop at the edge of the street. Homeowner will have to come in and have a pay-his-own contractor to extend it up to the home and potentially do some replumbing or something back in the home. So running roughly $5,000 to $8,000 for most homes that aren't set way back. This number varies wildly. If you have a house that's 450 feet back and you have a really expensive driveway, you're going to find that's woefully inadequate to pay for it. But most of the homes in the project area are on relatively small lots. Even the commercial properties tend to not be that large. So that's what we try to do, is kind of put that in as based on this. The one other comment I'll make, Paul, as I finish this slide is the commercial assessments on this vary quite a bit based on the size of the property. But I think what we presented back in March, Corey, was that the average commercial property was essentially 2 EDUs. So that's not an unusual number. That second column is also fairly similar to what you'd see for commercial.
Okay. Pertinent question from Fred?
Just a quick question on the connection fee. For the town at 100 EDUs, did you plug in the 100 times the 1,500 for the town, or is it some other?
So what I didn't actually right now, it's not, I tried to be conservative in the financial piece of that in the model, and what we did is for large users, we actually assigned I forget, Corey, it's a $5,000 or $10,000 one-time
Cap,
large
okay,
user
okay.
cap, rather than 100 times
Yeah,
1,500
that's, I
would
was
be,
just trying to.
which would be, you know, a lot of money. So
Okay.
we have to make those decisions though down the road because as an issue of fairness, the town has to recognize the same types of costs that they're gonna have other users recognize.
On the other hand, the town already has a septic system that works, so.
Well,
there's
that's-
a
Right.
push and to shove.
And a lot of folks that get service will have that too. So we'll talk about those balancing issues. But what we tried to do, Fred, in reference to, and you've been involved in a lot of the meetings, we're trying to not be overly reliant on too much cash flowing in from the town right now, so that we can make sure it's good. I think what that means is when we get to the final numbering, hopefully numbers will come down.
Right, okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Fred, for looking out for the town as customer. Next.
So the last slide, just a couple of quick updates on other things, because there's been a lot of things going on, other things that have been going on. We are continuing quite heavily to continue to talk through potential partners, and one of the interesting things that come about is Sam Park and the Point has re-expressed interest, even though we had taken him out of the project. And that's a really promising thing, because that would be excellent for the town as an overall. And
Keith,
for
we do have
project
the
in general.
letter from Sam, do we, at this point?
We do have a letter from Sam Park that asks that his property be included in the study that we.
So, a lot of work still to do on that, and
Very, very recent, but
lot
very
of-
positive.
Absolutely brand new information, but really positive information, and our goal here will be making sure it works for Sam and that it does, keeps our finance plan smooth and make sure that those impacts for anyone, as if anything, come down. So we got a lot of legwork to do to make all the details happen. Second one that's really promising is the Mass Ready Mix. Same issue, they've expressed some interest and some concerns. They are a major partner we would like to see with the reuse water.
Right.
And that's part and parcel of what we've now adjusted with our new grant application. But they also had expressed interest in a sewer connection as well. So we've got some new partnerships and some really important projects, big picture wise, of why you do these things that are coming up. Very promising all on those fronts. Mike talked, and the Planning Commission members talked extensively about the master plan. The major issue we have here is we're trying our best to keep these folded together, so this is not, separate processes and mystery. There's a lot of hopefully coordination going on here, and we keep it moving. We do have a one sheet informational flyer, probably a trifold. that
Looks
is
something like this.
Pretty close in draft form, and Paul is gonna give us final edits on that very soon.
Tomorrow morning.
And hopefully, within a week, that will be ready for mailing to all the residents, and people will have even more and colorful information on the project to remind you of what we've talked about. And then, obviously, last, the meaning of our meeting here today, the October 29th special town meeting. Our anticipation right now is to come before the town meeting with, if it's the selectmen's will, to come before the town for $2.2 million, which would be the system design costs at this point in time. And that would allow us to continue to move forward with all the pieces, and hopefully also get the remainder of the financing plan in place so that we can come back at a near future town meeting thereafter for construction money.
Board members, I know, Chase, you're very much involved, but anything we've missed here, or you have?
Not really. I mean, I think this pretty much covers it. I'm excited to see the informational material go out. One thing I do want to emphasize is that what we are asking for at this point is the design monies. And because we're asking for the design money, there are nuances, details to ultimately how this gets implemented, which are not answered and we don't intend to answer. For example, exactly how the opt-in, opt-out is going to work. There's still solutions to be resolved there. Exactly how the timing and the phasing. We have ideas, we have concepts which are built into the cost estimates, but that level of analysis isn't done. We are at a point though where the level of analysis justifies going forward with the design costs And furthermore, we're at a point going forward where we believe that we have enough expressed state support to bring in the $6.7 million that's been anticipated here, understanding that there's a little bit of a guessing game going in there, and it could be 4, could be 10, trying to make a reasonable estimate. So going forward, the reason that it's being sort of bifurcated, we have design money, and then the next phase after that is, here's a design, and I mean, maybe even like the fire station, the ideal scenario is that we go forward with getting the design money so that the next time it comes before the town, we can say to the town, here's the design specification, here's the design, here's the bid, here's the actual cost, because Chief, the fire station started, 10 days after town meeting when it was funded? Maybe not even 10 days, because everything was all lined up. So the idea is get the design money in place so that the voters know exactly what they're buying when we vote on going forward with the full cost.
Okay, Cindy?
Sure. So I actually sat in on the Economic Development Committee meeting at their last meeting, and they're very interested in getting the brochure that's being put together and helping promote and share information about this project within the community, so.
And in talking with James Kennedy, the Littleton Business Association will independently be doing, or under their aegis, promotional stuff. So they'll have same information or similar information presented differently. Ours has to be and should be just informational. The Business Association has the independent opportunity to present a advocacy position.
Right.
So there'll be at least 2 pieces of information going out.
Right, great.
And one of the things that this goes back to our discussion of the Master Plan Implementations Committee with work with zoning, is that though their work and this fit together nicely, one is not predicated on the other. That is, if for some reason the town elected not to go forward with the zoning, the sewer, in my opinion anyway, still makes sense, and the opposite is also true, that they're not dependent on one another, and yet they dovetail nicely together. And so I think what we'll see from the business advocates is looking at it more holistically. But again, coming back to what we know and what we don't know, the zoning implications, we look at these artistic renderings of what the options might be in the common, but those are potentials. I wouldn't even say they're necessarily aspirational. This is what it could be. And so, we still have work to do to determine what kind of zoning we want to go around the sewer aspect of it, and how we want to control the housing, the mixed use, what type of housing, what type of business, so on and so forth. So lots of decisions still to be made.
Okay. Residents, any questions, citizens, comments? Sir?
Ben Ricard, New Estate Road, with Sam Park back in the mix, is that another option for the Quirk location?
Not so far.
Yeah,
The question
right,
was asked, and
We probably shouldn't get into too much of the details of the discussions, but don't count on it. I think he has essentially a built system, and that's one of the factors, but we're not expecting that's where the Quirk will go.
yeah, it's probably more because he's got, businesses there, and hotels and restaurants and other uses that may not be conducive to, processing food waste from elsewhere.
And also a bunch of engineers that'll beat me up as soon as I go astray here. I think from a design standpoint, it makes sense to have the Quirk closer to where the discharge is going to be, farther on down the line, rather than closer to where a lot of the input's coming from. Because as we all know, if it goes through, it'll be piped out to use the fields right now with the existing septic system, with the existing town sewer system discharges. Is that, Corey or Kent, you guys want to speak to that at all?
There's a lot of factors, involved in trying to site it, and, all of those have to be, things like that have to be balanced, so. Yeah.
Okay.
And right now, the conceptual design doesn't include the specifics of things. I mean, I'm going to assume Mr. Ricard's asking because the DPW lot is more or less in his backyard. The design
I
doesn't.
got 30 new neighbors in my
Right.
backyard.
Doesn't yet include specific considerations for things like noise reduction and stuff like that, just a general facility cost right now, is
Yep.
that
Right.
fair?
I was out of town when Sandpark approached the folks about the meeting, and your question was the first question that I asked remotely, was whether the quirk was in the mix, and I was disappointed with the answer.
At this point, that's the
At this
point,
point,
yeah.
right.
And you'll have to, I hope you'll indulge us that we can't give a blow-by-blow of negotiations when we get to that point.
Maybe there's a hard bargain.
Right.
We are, I will say this, and I don't think this is tipping our negotiating hand too much. We are a little bit hopeful that bringing the point on board convinces or spurs the owner of the IBM property to reconsider their position. I would not say we're optimistic about it, but it's
Possible.
not 100% dead like it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And two related points I'd make in closing for my part is, one is the model, and this is great thanks to everybody involved, our own folks, tough questions from Finance Committee participation, our expertise from Light and Water, our folks in-house, but especially our engineers. We have a working model that wasn't predicated on either the Point or IBM, and now, now we have the luxury of being able to look at incorporating one of those into it. And the second point is, he came back to us, so there's gonna be a reason for that. We didn't have to go begging, so that's a positive. Okay. Anything further on this one? We're running dangerously away from schedule, but somebody's gonna make the. Right.
Thank you, folks.
Oh, thank you. And
Thanks, Kat, for it.
I'll be in touch with you guys tomorrow morning, Corey or whatever, by response email and with Christine, is it?
Christine, yeah.
Email me.
Okay, you? Okay, great. All right. Keith, what do we got
Now we're
here?
in administration,
Thank
so
you.
I invite Bonnie up to, and then we will also have from our list, we will hear from the fire department about a request. The articles we have for, call it the other PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so the list of articles that we're plowing through. So Article 1 is bills of prior years, which we typically put on a warrant. We don't have any yet, but we put it on. Another is budget amendments to the current fiscal year budget. This would allow a motion to be made to transfer funds from one account to another. And we've got a couple of things that are on the radar screen. One, Bonnie reminded us, was the funding for the dispatch, the additional dispatcher positions that we created. The funding source is the revenue from the ambulance, from the ALS.
So that'll be budget neutral.
Yeah, but we do actually have to go back and increase the appropriation for the police department to pay for that staffing level. But the offset is the money from the BLS revenues accounts. The other was, there's the request for support for the bottom line for the VFW, which we've had a number of discussions around. I'm not sure where we are on that, or I know Cindy had raised the issue. I think we're trying to identify an amount of money that we can reasonably defend with whatever framework the law and guidance from the Department of Revenue holds.
Yeah, my understanding is we can appropriate a certain amount, and I'm looking to Tom to kind of guide me at what the level of support that is allowed. But I think we need to define the purpose to be support of the facility or some other allowed purpose. It
Right.
can't just be to the VFW.
Right. My understanding under the statute is it's operating costs for the VFW, and there is specific guidelines that will dictate what that amount could be. I did send some financial information that the quartermaster had provided to us regarding their financial situation, what their operating costs are. Tom said that we could enter into an agreement and move this forward if we structured it properly. So we need to, I would like to move forward with that.
Once I get the amounts from Tom that are allowed, then I'll come up with.
Perfect.
We've got our agenda items, unfortunately, a little akimbo to this, in that we're coming up, review of our goals in light of
Right.
budget priorities, and this is definitely one of the goal-identified ones, too, so there's a couple others, but I'm not sure, I mean, this one is probably something we can handle in the context of the existing town budget, whereas a couple of the others may be more appropriate for the upcoming budget,
Right.
but.
The smaller the number.
Right, yeah, and the less
easier it is to-
complicated.
Yeah,
Right.
to do in a special town meeting budget, but in the fall.
So what more do we need to do to,
Well, there's more work that we need to do to bring you back motions and recommendations to be made, which we can do for the meeting on the 24th of September. The ask tonight will be to put the boilerplate article on to allow budget transfers to be made.
okay. I guess what I was thinking more in terms of specific to the VFW issue is whether we needed any further guidance from Department of Revenue, or how do they want this? Are there do's and don'ts that they spell out very clearly?
I think once Tom gives us the opinion, he's already in
Okay.
consultation with the
Right,
Department of Revenue. so-
right.
Okay.
We just need to find out from Tom exactly,
What the purpose.
right.
amount and the purpose.
Exactly, and then how that will be structured.
Okay.
So we'll plan to update the board at our next meeting on the
Okay.
24th.
Okay.
And I'll write that down. VFW update. The next financial article is to fund collective bargaining agreement. We've funded 3 of the 4 union contracts because we had reached agreement with 3 of the 4 unions. We will have an agenda item later tonight where we will be discussing the 4th contract, and in anticipation of that, we would want to put an article in that would allow you to fund it if we go forward with an agreement. This is in the category of, I'll just cover the next one up on the screen there, number 4, local excise and retail sales of marijuana for adult use. That's a local option statute to have town meeting adopt the maximum 3% retail sales tax on marijuana, and we would very much like to tap into that revenue stream. We're not being deprived of any of that revenue yet, because there is no licensed retail establishment in Littleton yet, but by the time there is, we want to have the ability to benefit financially from the retail sales.
And that is an unrestricted 3%, or that is?
It's 3%,
specific
it's
to-
3% of the of retail sales, so it cannot.
But it's not tied to, what's the language associated with what we can put in an HCA?
No, it's not, no,
Okay.
it's the HCA, the host community agreement by statute is limited to, or by interpretation of the Cannabis Control Commission, would be limited to, we cannot take revenues in a host community agreement that exceeds what it costs the town to provide the services back.
Up to a cap of whatever it is, a couple
Up to a
percent.
cap of 3% of the total sales. This is an absolute up to 3%
Goes straight to
of
the
retail
town's bottom line.
sales to go to the bottom line, yep. And then it's an administrative but non-financial article, the very last one, number 12, amend town bylaws to allow alcohol on town property. So we want to put that on the warrant. And saving the biggest for last, we have, not even the biggest, the sewer was the biggest, what am I saying? But we have a request from the fire chief to update you on his search for a replacement for the ladder truck and a proposed funding mechanism to come up with a residual amount of money, $812,000 to add, $810,000 to add to the $200,000 we've already appropriated to purchase a demo vehicle that we are aware of, and I'd invite the chief to come up and talk about that.
We're gonna buy the demo, huh?
Well, we have an opportunity. The manufacturers they do a few demos a year. It takes roughly 12 to 18 months to construct these. So on this cycle, they actually have one of their demos, which you can see on the screen here. For the major components, engine, pump, tank, it meets everything that we were looking for in the original truck that we were looking to spec out. It may not have a few of the other, things, compartmentation, would sacrifice some of that stuff to at least get the baseline vehicle. And by taking advantage of this demo, we would potentially be saving between $200,000 and $300,000 as compared to a spec vehicle.
And there could be other upside to buying a demo too, right? I mean, kinks have been worked out, the thing's been put through the tests, it's actually, get some road miles on it. Yeah.
Correct, right. It would, potentially, correct, go to maybe a few shows, they'd work out those. It would be, this particular vehicle will be rolling off the assembly line and would be available in the first quarter of the year. Typically, if we were to wait till, say, spring and went to town meeting for approval, ordered in July, we're waiting an additional 18 months for construction.
Right, if you had to go, and if they had to build it from your spec.
Correct.
That it would take that long.
So this particular model is actually at the end of its production line, and like I said, should be ready in the first quarter.
And this is the same one we had out on the property a month or so ago?
It's very similar, yeah.
Help me understand, if it hasn't been produced, how is it a demo?
They do 3 or 4 of them a year or every 18 months to prep for the next shows that are coming up, the Chiefs shows. So they put together what models that they're looking for and will set that to go to the nearest shows.
If I may, they build it to their spec.
Okay.
So they have 4 a year and they boom, boom, boom. So it's gonna have features that they'll wanna try, hey, look what we make on that. As opposed to us saying, well, we want that compartment's 24 inches wide, we want ours 32 inches wide, and we want this color scheme. It is what it is, they make it so you can go online and see that spec, and then it'll say production completion at this date. So they're just they build about 4 of them a year, and to coincide, like almost like a quarter. Every quarter they have one that is gonna come out. So if we were to say, okay, it's gonna go on it's gonna be an article for fall town meeting, we could say on October 1st, put a 30-day hold on that truck. And if the money passes on the 29th, you could effectively, the truck is ours. If we don't, it goes back into the cycle and anybody can buy it, if it's available on the 1st.
Have you given a good look to the sort of functionalities that you're looking for that may not be in this demo that you would have to add on after?
I think it's more just some features that normally we wouldn't get. Like there's a couple options. This has a green feature, they call it. So in other words, you got this giant motor that runs the truck. Well, what they designed theirs with, and it's a feature they have, is when you if you park the truck and you're not operating the aerial or the pump, this generator kicks on. And the main engine shuts down, and that generator, you can see it's highlighted in green. That runs all it'll run your HVAC and all your lighting. And then when you need the truck, it goes back to the main motor. And so, in reality, I don't think we'd spec something like that, but it's a feature that comes with this truck and you have it. So we're looking at more, it's your compartment sizes more than the features of the truck. It's going to carry the same amount it's going to have the same seating configuration we would spec. It's going to have the motor, the tank, the pump. It's more just into, we may find after we get it here, hey, we can't fit everything we thought we'd fit on it, but we'll get stuff on it that enables us. It's a different truck than what we have. So when we replace a fire engine, we're swapping an engine for an engine. So you take the equipment off the engine, put on your new one. Well, our ladder doesn't have a pump. It doesn't have hose. This truck's going to have hose and some other things that we've kind of put some money in there to say, in addition to the cost of truck, we need this to outfit it because we don't have the surplus equipment to take off another truck to put on there. Some of it we do, but a lot of it we don't. But feature-wise, I don't think it's really going to present a big a huge detriment that once we get it, oh my God, I wish we had all this other stuff. Personally, I don't know, you might feel different.
No, I agree, and, I mean, it's for the savings, or the potential savings of ordering or receiving a demo, that's a sacrifice that we'd have to take. I mean, we're not gonna come down the line in a year from now to say, hey, we need to outfit this truck with a few other things. That's not the case. It is what it is, and we'd make it work.
Numbers? Yeah?
I would say I'm a little skeptical if we're gonna make it work for a 30-year piece of infrastructure. We would never build a building here with, well, you know, we'll shoehorn it if we have to. And it's one thing if it's we'll make it work for a 1-year piece of infrastructure. A little concerned about you guys getting stuck with something for 30 years that's frustrating a chief who's right now in diapers, you know?
Now, so, maybe the wrong wording, but it has the compartmentation. We'd make our equipment fit it, and it would work. Like the deputy said, we just may not be able to put everything we want on it. For, you know, looking at some of these other communities that are, Webster, they just over $2 million for a very similar vehicle, with extensive compartmentation. We have the other vehicles where we'd have the ability to move some of the other equipment to. If it's going to be an incident of substantial size, the majority of the equipment's going to be there.
Sounds like, I mean, by going spec, it has a huge impact on the cost, huh? I mean, that's a big jump.
Well, yeah, tailor-made or off the shelf,
Yeah.
really, is what we're talking about.
Engineering costs, everything else, because you basically have to design it.
Well, and part of that is a decision that you make that if you're essentially buying new here, you're buying a late model, you're buying last year's model, if you will. But what we have often done is we're buying last decade's model and then on some of the equipment and then refurbishing it to bring it up to a level. But we haven't, and it's often to just make sure that we're not paying full price for, you know, we need a piece of equipment and we're looking to make an economical decision about how do you buy it, to have it versus not having it. Because we can't always get can't always get what you want.
So you're confident at this time that you can get everything you need on this vehicle for this time?
You know, I think that would, I couldn't say right now that, yes, we'll get everything on there. We'll get the majority of what we
That you need to be able to
have to
function
operate that
and
vehicle, yes.
operate, right.
Yes.
We need the aerial. And,
Need the what?
We need the aerial part.
Right.
I mean, everything else are hand tools and saws and things of that nature.
They will all
But
fit.
you're buying a chassis with an aerial device and a pump and a water tank. So those are the ones we spec. And the rest of it is just you know, where the hand tools and things of that nature are going to fit.
Those are the accessory to the main
Exactly.
mission,
Right,
right?
okay.
Exactly.
So why not simply do this 6 months down the road as part of the normal budgeting process with pursuing a spec vehicle 6 months from now instead of as part of a special time?
From that point, for a spec, pure luck that this one actually met the tank, pump, and engine capacities that we actually had in our spec. None of the other demos that they had in production do. So it's pure luck if we look for a demo for that for next year. They may or may not have something like that. And if they don't, and we have to order it, the price will go up, and it'll be another 18 months for build. So you're really waiting on time.
And part of it, Chase, is that we have a 1988 ladder truck.
Right.
And to wait 18 months to replace it is going to get more, it's going to be harder to keep it in service.
Is that, again, did you go out looking to find a demo, or was it the fact that this demo popped up and you said, you know what, Is that the case? I mean, did
That's
this,
exactly what it is. We didn't actually go shopping for a demo to try to bring this any sooner. A couple of the other issues that have come up in the last couple of weeks is engine. It's got a significant oil leak. And the mechanic said, just keep feeding it. Do not dive into the repair of it because it will most likely lead to a whole engine rebuild. So it's just not, it's not at a point where it needs to come out of service. It's in service, but just keep feeding it. And right now, depending on the track that we take, that's the best solution for it. If we have to get into that, then we will, so be it. But
And-
we'll deal with that as it comes.
If I recall correctly, the annual carrying costs for that are on the order of $30,000 to $40,000 a year for the existing piece of equipment.
Last year, we put 17 into it. Year before, it was in the ballpark of 13.
We increased our capital repair budget because of the ladder, so we increased that account.
I mean, I guess I look at this and I see us spending, let's use my number instead of yours, spending, 3% carrying cost, and still don't see a reason for sort of doing this outside of our typical capital planning approach. This is circumventing that, and I understand it's been part of the capital planning approach for a long time. It's not a surprise to us. But 2 to 3% a year for carrying costs, I'm wary of going outside of our typical budgeting process on something of this magnitude. That's, I
But
want to make sure
we
to
have a
give due
30-year-old ladder
consideration.
truck that the manufacturer won't supply parts on it. And that's really, it's a safety issue. The longer we put it off, we're either gonna put.
It's
from
basically
what I
money
hear,
after
from what I
back
heard,
to fix
if the argument is, if, on the financial argument anyways, what's the smartest thing? It's the differential between the two prospective costs. What you can buy now, I mean, that's at least what I heard that got through my brain, is about less than half of what we could be paying for. I mean, what would be the price of the?
You're roughly $200,000 to $300,000 savings.
Okay, so all
From
right, so
now
it's
to
about
ordering it
a
from-
third off of the price of what we had, if we went to spec on it, right?
Yeah, we had budgeted $1.2 million for it.
Okay,
For
That was the
spec.
first number, then we
Okay.
came down from that number
Right.
to,
The demo,
just over a
the-
million.
yeah,
Right.
for the demo.
Okay.
Yeah.
and now this is 800 and change?
No, that's because we already have 200,000 set aside
Okay.
from our
So
application
that
for the
800 and
AFG
change accounts for the 200 that we've already. put
in
the
addition
bank.
to the 200.
Okay, so the price tag's about $1 million.
It's $1,010,000. It's $1,010,000 and change.
Well, that's not as good a deal. I mean, it's a good deal.
But looking roughly 18 months out or from spring, we're in the ballpark of 1.3-ish. That's from the manufacturer.
Have you presented this to the Finance Committee yet? I guess you wouldn't, you'd come to us first.
Have not.
right? All right. Finance Committee, Fred, what are your initial thoughts on
Well,
this?
this is the first time
Right.
hearing of it. They've been patiently waiting for a number of years, and they've been put off and put off and put off. It's a 30-year-old truck, so one of these days it's gonna go belly up. We'll discuss it tomorrow evening, I guess, when we go through the warrant, the same way you guys are. I don't know what the feeling of the other members would be, but I'd be favorably disposed, I think. And how would you propose on paying for it, Mike? That's a real question.
For this amount, I'm waiting for the assessors to meet on the 20th of September to do an overlay surplus consideration for release. Probably in the neighborhood of, a few $100,000. They typically do that every year. What I would do is apply whatever funding I could towards meeting the traffic signalization, the $200,000 for that, the $42,000 for the ZBA or the zoning assistance, and then the balance towards the ladder truck. and then do short-term borrowing for the difference, whatever could be made up, maybe a 3 to 5 year ban, and just pay that down over that period, rather than
So
permanently
about how
financing.
much would you want to borrow, ballpark?
I'm thinking probably 600,000, say,
Over 3 to 5?
3 to 5 years, yeah.
Okay, and if we were entertaining the other option, that would probably be, well, I mean, that would be a different budget cycle, but what would that be, borrow the entirety?
No, probably not the entirety, would probably be, still looking at the 200,000 that's
Right,
available in the
right.
article. And then I would look at what we have for capital through that spending cycle, but, we usually would take a piece of funding from that capital plan. And, I would like to borrow as short a period as I could.
So bottom line, the delta is 200 of doing it now versus doing it in the normal course of events in May. It's, you save 200,000 thereabouts, and you get the equipment 18 months, or 2 years earlier, I guess, 6 months between now and May, and then 18 months on top of that. So 200,000 in 2 years is what you save. That's it, so.
Okay.
And in reviewing it at the staff level, it was like, well, it is doing it a little differently, but you know what, those are significant factors that you need to be able to,
Right.
consider and decide.
Okay. All right, well, there's a lot to think about here. Do you have something?
I was just gonna say, so if we borrow the $600,000, are we losing that $200,000? Does it even out? Like, what is the interest rate on the $600,000 borrowing?
Ban interest rates right now are under 2%. I'd look to do, like I said, 3 to 5 years.
Right.
Those rates are gonna change every year when you roll the ban over, but I'm gonna
Right.
pay it down every year by a certain amount. Obviously, it's gonna be better than doing a permanent bond issue for a 10-year period, which
Right.
is what is more traditional in this type of purchase. But
So in general, I mean, is it like 20,000, 30,000, and the
Certainly less than
over
200,000.
5 years
Yeah.
of borrowing costs might, does it even get that high?
it would be.
It wouldn't be
It would be
anything
minimal.
significant.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Okay. All right.
And rates are going up.
Right.
So
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
it won't get cheaper going forward, is all I'm saying.
Okay, although the vehicle of a 30-year borrowing, if it were lumped in with that, would be a cheaper rate, but it would be spread over
Yeah,
time
but
and
now
spend
you're-
more
now
money.
you're
Right,
impacting the
right,
long
right,
term.
right.
I mean, I guess I echo Chase's concern about, 30 years, 30-year vehicle. 5 years from now, the town's changing, it's growing. We just want to make sure that if we invest in this vehicle now, it's going to suit your needs 5, 10 years down the road.
And that's really why we've
You know?
looked at this vehicle and really been looking at demos, just different models over the last
Right.
2.5 years. And Tom, a couple of the other firefighters have basically gone across the country, looked at the different manufacturers, the different makes, models, between the ladders, the towers, all of the different components. And this style of truck is what is going to best meet our needs going forward with the construction that's in town now and coming to town.
Okay. Right.
Okay.
And just an off-the-wall question, how many story building will it cover?
It's 100 feet, so
Okay, so 8
depending
to
on the
10 stories,
distance.
So when you guys build up the common, we'll be able
There you go.
to save the people.
We'll put a 60-foot cap on
There
it.
you go, right, there you go.
I am rather uncomfortable here. I mean, we're talking about essentially $1 million, and we're talking about hypothetical numbers and sort of back-of-the-envelope math, which is fine in the sense if we were 2 months before this, or if this was part of the initial budgeting process, I would be okay with that. But we're talking about putting something on the warrant based on, well, we think it'll probably be about this or it'll be about that. And I understand that the timing is significant here and that we have a certain amount of time to act on this, but I'm also a little bit, say, cynical from the manufacturer's perspective, that this just came up once it became clear that the town of Littleton was actively pursuing a vehicle, and lo and behold, our salesman decided to show up, and hey, well, we know you weren't gonna go for 1.2, but we do have this $1 million option here. I'm uncomfortable doing it outside of the course of our normal capital plan, particularly without the numbers in front
Yeah,
of us.
normally I would agree, in this particular case, anything over $1 million, like, so if we end up foregoing this opportunity and decide, you know, we're gonna spec out the equipment that we want, it's gonna be $1.3 million, and it's gonna take 18 months. So you have 200,000 on hand, I'm gonna be borrowing, I'm looking at $1 million. At that point, now I'm looking at, okay, it's gonna be May, we're also looking at the sewer borrowing, maybe I need to start lumping those things together and start looking at a long-term debt issue. So now we're placing, you know, a 10-year plus a 20-year issue out, you know, in the town's financials. That's an impact for a long-term period. I need to look at that because if it's closer to $1 million, I've got to play the rate game and where's the market going, and you know, it's probably better to lock in a rate on a larger note like that than play a 3-year game. I'm comfortable on the 3-year game. We've done that. We did that with the track. We've done that with a number of other projects that we've had, and we've been very successful with it. This particular one, I'm looking at, you know, 600,000. Probably can do that over 3 years without impacting the capital plan too drastically. At $1 million, I need to look at a 10-year game. So that's kind of where I am at this point. And I know it's still back of the envelope, but I'm much more comfortable with that number than $1 million.
But before town meeting, you'll have better numbers.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you have the
I'll have better
opportunity
numbers
to
for the
look at
24.
relatively solid
Yeah, I
numbers
think
before town
one,
meeting.
and maybe this gets back to the approach that we had come up with when Chuck couldn't be here and he had legitimate questions that were important to him, that the chair's direction was, well, let's put it on the warrant tonight, let's talk about it 2 weeks from tonight and see if we still feel the same way.
You read my mind. If we could segue off of this one item, and unless anybody's got anything to add to it, to talk to the entirety of the warrant, I think, and tell me if I go astray here, Keith, that we could, with 3 members here, a majority of those present could vote to include or not include on a split vote, or 2 to 1, any of them.
Right.
But I would much prefer to have the full board have a chance to weigh in on all of them. The only way we can really do that is to include all of them now and revisit it on the
Right,
24th.
because the warrant will have closed, but it will be in your hands, and we
Yeah.
have removed things from the warrant prior to posting, and that's really, we're looking for a procedural way to give the full board the opportunity to.
But just to be clear, and if that doesn't sell, just to be clear,
The board has the procedural authority to pull things back regardless of whether we have a split vote here or not.
yeah,
As
but
far
we
as
would,
putting
it would
it-
require a split vote to get it on, but I'm saying if it's 2 to 1 against now, and then it doesn't get that light of day, we have that right. You know, majority can say no to any of these, and it doesn't go forward. I'm just saying, I want to make you aware that, that you can do that. And conversely, just as you said, a 2 to 1 vote here can actually move something forward. But in any event, I'm hopeful that both Chuck and Joe will have a shot at these on the 24th. But that's, entirely up to the 3 of us. So if there's any, if you want to talk about it as a package, that's fine. If you'd say, I'd like to, hold aside the following articles and let's vote the rest of them through and then talk about the others individually, that's fine too. What's your preferences? Cindy?
I don't have a preference.
Okay, Chase?
You can do 12 separate motions.
Yeah, or we can do a
14,
couple of
or you-
chunks, we
or
can
you
do
could
one big one and
Yeah,
then.
maybe on this list, if you identify the ones that you'd like to pull off for separate votes.
Let's put it
and you
this
do
way,
the
I don't
rest.
have any reservations about anything on the list, personally, so.
Yeah.
I feel differently about 2.
Yeah.
8A,
No, I mean, you had some great
8C.
input tonight.
Yeah, you did.
I would rather, I don't think 8A or 8C belongs on the warrant right now, although I'm receptive to the idea that we only represent 3 of 5 members of our board.
Okay.
And
So-
I would prefer to pull 8A and 8C off and hold separate votes on it.
Okay, in that case, we'll probably end up, that the full board gets it, but you have the opportunity to weigh in with your vote and you're on record.
Okay.
Which
For
is-
better or for worse, right?
Right, but no, I mean, look, I applaud you wading into controversial, subjects, so God bless you.
So maybe the motion would be to.
First motion,
you could-
anyway.
The first motion would be, do this and then call out the numbers 1 through 7, 8B, and then 9 through 12. That would be the first one, and then you have two separate motions on 8A and 8C.
Okay, and before we dive into that, let's just confirm as we look at the list, are we all okay with all the rest of it, at least going forward? We always have the right to change our minds, we're politicians, right?
It's not changing your mind, it's reevaluating.
Okay, all right. Okay, then how about a motion as Keith outlined there, Madam Clerk? Do you want to take a shot at
Take a
that?
shot at, well, all right, move that the Board of Selectmen vote to insert Articles 1 through 7.
Well, full language up there, might as well.
Right, now I'm reading off the thing. Oh, all right, we already did it.
Yep.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to insert the following articles onto the warrant for the October 29, 2018 special town meeting, subject to approval as to form by town council. One, prior.
I don't think,
Yeah, just the numbers.
Just do 1 through 7?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then
8B.
8B, and then 9 through 12.
Second?
Okay, motion's made and seconded to insert the articles as listed onto the warrant for the October 29th special town meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, for the remaining two, do you want to make a motion, Madam Clerk, on,
Yeah, so it's just 8A and 8C,
you might as well
correct?
handle them individually
That
too.
were, well, no, how do I word that?
You could do,
Because we're not.
you could vote to insert, you could
Yeah.
take
Just do
the front, the
Top
beginning of
language,
it.
just go to A.
And then Articles 8A and 8B, because or 8C rather, because if I'm reading it, that there would be 2 in favor and 1 opposed.
Yeah, knowing
You don't
that,
have
do
to
you
do it
have a
twice.
preference whether we do them separately or together?
Doesn't
Makes no
matter to
difference?
me.
Okay, I
all
see,
right.
so we're
Functional
still gonna
result.
do it, okay.
Right.
So move that the Board of Selectmen vote to insert the following articles onto the warrant for the October 29, 2018 special town meeting, subject to approval as deformed by town council, Articles 8A and 8C.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded, any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed?
Nay?
Okay, great. There's
Okay.
democracy in action, the way it's supposed to work.
Thank you,
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
appreciate the
Yes,
opportunity.
of course. And you did raise some great points,
Yeah, you did.
Yep.
and they were new to me, so I gotta think
Yep,
about those.
We've got to address, it's really good, we need to address all of those issues.
Yep. Okay, hopefully we can skip, hop, and gallop through the rest of the agenda. You skip, you hop, and I'll gallop. Public input. Mr. Pro, you joined us. Anything you wanna?
I'm here to support Chief with the initiative to get another SRO.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
Thank you.
Where is it? Yeah. Okay, what's that, the selectmen's goals?
Yeah,
for
that's
the-
under the
yeah,
goals
right,
review,
right,
yeah.
okay.
That's the 8 o'clock one.
Any other public input? Okay. You talked a little bit too, every now and then.
Yeah, well, but there was a lot to talk about.
That's right, there was, yeah. Fulsome discussion, as Charlie Kay used to say, yeah. All right, member updates.
Sure, you want me to go?
Sure.
All right, great. So I'll just give a quick update on the Space Needs Working Group. I'm now the vice chair in Chuck's absence. So we submitted the RFQ for the OPM. We're going to form a subgroup this coming meeting to talk about the specific criteria we're looking for from applicants. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at the possibility of leasing space. A couple of the members of that group have brought that up. So we're just going to pursue our options. There are some spaces available for rent on Air Road in Littleton that might be, have some potential. But again, that's just preliminary. We're just looking at all possibilities for us. And then I wanted to talk about the veterans. As we mentioned before, there's a special ceremony coming up on November 11th to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, the commander and quartermaster of the post are asking for a middle school or a high school student that would be willing to read a poem at the ceremony on the 11th. I did put out some feelers on Facebook, but I just wanted to mention it here in case any parents have a child that might want to, we're actually looking for two, that might want to do that as part of the ceremony. If they could get in contact with me, that would be very welcome. And I wanted to thank everybody who stopped by the Veterans Tent at the Country Fair on Saturday. It was a lot of fun. The Friends of the VF Littleton veterans put out games, and we had a lot of kids stop by. And I just want to congratulate Jake Kidlin, who is the newest member from Littleton. He's now a U.S. Marine. He completed boot camp. And it was really nice because he stopped by the tent, and when he introduced himself to the veterans, they just came out and totally, they welcomed him, and we got a nice photo with them. So that was really a nice moment to see. So I just wanted to congratulate him and thank everybody for supporting the veterans. And again, if anybody has a child that might want to read a poem on the 11th, please reach out to me.
Okay, thank you. Chase?
Two items coming up that are worth noting that I want to make sure the public's aware of. On September 23rd is the Littleton Road Race, 5K. Anthony, you running that?
Not gonna be in town.
Oh.
Vacation.
So the Littleton Road Race supports both the Littleton track and field facility as well as the Friends of the COA. And so that's happening on the 23rd. Registration's still open. Please come join us. The second is that the Littleton Conservation Trust is hosting 6 or 7 hikes of our big conservation areas between now and the end of the year through December 8th, starting with September 15th, Cobb Memorial and Nagog Hill Orchard, and then running all the way through. So perhaps, Anthony, I'll send you this and ask if you could send it out via the town social media. It's a great opportunity to get exposure to conservation land you don't normally see. And similarly along those lines, I'd like to thank the LCT volunteers for doing yeoman's work in removing a bunch of graffiti on Lookout Rock over the last several weeks. That's a lot of work to haul water up there, haul all the materials up there, just to then bust your butt and scrub graffiti off of rocks up there. So thank you very much to LCT for everything that you guys do.
Okay, great. I have nothing in the interest of time, so we can move along. Keith, the review of FY 2019 Selectmen's goals for FY 2020 budget priorities. As we look at the, even though our discussions earlier tonight were relative to adjustments to the FY 19 budget, we're very close to beginning the process for 2020. And I know there was at least one particular item in consideration, and that's why Chief Pinard is here. Is there anything you want to say in
Right, just in general, and it sounded like a good idea 2 weeks ago, but you've scheduled time tonight to prepare for your meeting 2 weeks from tonight. The
Right.
next joint meeting with the FinCom and the school committee and the selectmen is on September 24th, at which you will vote to adopt budget recommendations. Those have typically been rather, or budget guidelines, and those have typically been rather broad, level funded, and mission budgets. We haven't typically gone into a level of detail of let's support new staffing for this one or that one, although at an early date, the Finance Committee is looking for priorities from the Board of Selectmen on substantively what do you want to see, so it's never too early to start. Just as a recap, the goals that you've adopted for fiscal 2019 are up on the board, the summary, that there may be things that come from there that find expression in the 2020 budgets. Some of them find expression in capital projects, I mean, sewer. Others, public safety, are all other capital projects, but also you have a proposal for a second school resource officer, which would be in an operating budget. So
Let me-
That's, and
okay.
you've got a presentation from the chief.
So let me suggest this to members as a way to go forward. I can be real quick identifying those items of, personal interest amongst our communal goals that I think I'd like to see either addressed or continue to be addressed in the 2020 budget. And then maybe each of the two of you can add yours, and we can save the SRO presentation for right after we finish that process. So just kind of exhaust the other.
Still do the SRO.
Oh, yeah, do it tonight. Yeah, just gonna say, I gotta go as quickly as this. Master plan and sewer are already, as long as we continue to support those two goals, the baby steps we made toward establishing capital budgeting for open space, getting that back into our saving structure is something I support. A lot of the smaller ticket items, such as the VFW, I'll either assume we're dealing with them now or other members will touch them. And then again, the SRO officer is a priority of mine, so I'll look forward to getting that presentation in a couple of minutes.
Right.
So was that quick?
That was good.
Wow.
So my, just quickly, open space, preserving open space is one of my priorities. I'm actually we have a meeting tomorrow night. We've got actually, that's the Affordable Housing Trust Committee tomorrow night. But certainly open space, affordable housing. Under Elder and Human Services, and this sort of ties in with the SRO, is Littleton Coalition Against Addiction, the opioid epidemic, which is what I think we could refer to as a budget orphan. I'd like to see some funding go into that this year or next year for teaching and programs and things along that line. As that program's growing, we're learning that there's more needs in the community that we need to meet. And I'll talk a little bit more about that during Chief Pinard's presentation about the SRO, because part of it is they're related to one another.
Great, great. Chase?
We're gonna go 3 for 3 here. Open space and funding thereof, either with capital monies or planning associated with it, and not necessarily restricting ourselves just to CPC funding. For that is a major priority of mine. And what I would really like to be able to do is, let me say that's got a budgetary aspect of it, but I don't want to start putting money away without a rubric or a plan for how we spend that money before a property shows up. Because if we end up with $1 million, I guarantee we'll blow $1 million on the first $1 million piece of land
How
that
that
shows
works.
up. So, but as far as budgeting is concerned, let's get the structure in place and put some monies aside for that. This year, Paul hit on the sewer. Obviously, we're staring down the barrel of a big funding item there. Fully support that. In terms of item 5, road improvements, complete streets, tip funding, and infrastructure, what I want to do is make sure that our budget has enough funding in it to allow us to continue to put shovel-ready projects on the shelf. Maybe not this year. We've done a good job over the last couple of years, but I do want to look out into the future to ensure that we've
Doing the
always got the
engineering
next
work, yeah.
thing going. We've got stuff at 10 and 25% design levels, so that when that funding pops up, we're ready to move on it, and we've got some ideas in the bank. And then the last aspect of it, and this sort of falls under the organizational review, but also several others, is I want to make sure that we've got plenty of resources available to make sure folks become acquainted with Open Checkbook, Munis, so that they can actually utilize it for what it can present to the community. Because all of the work that you're doing, if it doesn't end up as something that the public feels is theirs and accessible, then we've only done half as much good as we could. So I very much want to make sure that the resources are there to.
And I'll echo that. If we need to go back and revisit a decision that we've come to find out wasn't the best one to make it work best, I'm willing to do that and commit funds to do that.
Absolutely.
And, trash something we might have spent some money on, well, not the whole big Munis thing, but I mean, to make sure the public, through our website, is able to get all the information we want them to get as easily as we want them to get it.
And I would echo that, even if that does mean that we've got to now that you're so far into it, Bonnie, if that means that we've got to rejigger something and that has a cost implication.
I don't want to hear, oh, well, we thought we were going to do that, but we can't. It's like, okay, no, we're going to do it. So,
Exactly. That transparency is vital in my mind, and I want to make sure that we have the resources available to pursue that transparency.
I've actually been working with, talking with Nancy Glencross about that whole process, because it's a big undertaking.
so we can expect a presentation at some point down the road?
Let's just keep adding things to our plate.
Right. All right, now, at this point, we're happy to hear the presentation from Chief Penard and Deputy Chief Patterson.
I'm just here for, most of it.
Right.
Just
Well, immoral
pretty face?
support as the case may
Pretty
be.
face, yeah, I like that.
Good evening. How are you? Sorry so late.
Yeah.
It's our fault, not his.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, everybody knows my passion for the school resource officer. I haven't been shy about it one bit. And even before becoming the chief of police, I had talked about it. When I first took on office, I was approached by a parent group, and I said, you know something? I'd bring them in and listen to them. So that's what I did. I brought them in and listened to their concerns and let them know that I was already working on it and what I feel the need for a second SRO actually is. So, if there's a clicker somewhere, Keith?
Keith's the clicker.
Is that as everybody, well, I'm not sure everybody knows that. 2004, we had the first COPS grant, and the COPS grant funded our first school resource officer position. Glenn McKeel, throwback, and John Kelly actually put the grant together. It was a 5-year grant. Yeah, that's you. You're on with it. Thanks. Put the grant together. It was a 5-year grant. The way the grant worked was the Department of Justice funded the first year fully. Second year was a 3/4 funding. Third, 50-50, 3/4, reversed to the police department at that point, and then we had to carry the 5th year on our own in the budget. After they carried that 5th year budget, it kept going all the way through because they implemented the program, and we saw the need for the program to stay where it was, so that's where we kept it. Right now, there is no grants like that out there for us to get a second SRO. So therefore, we're here today in front of you, so I can show you my pitch as to why I think we need it. What is a school resource officer? Everybody sees, the officer in the school, what they do, but does anybody really know exactly what the school resource officer does? And it's a multitude of hats that they have to wear within the school district and within town. They're not only a police officer that is armed within the school to protect any problems that may arise, but they're also a teacher, they're a speaker, they're a guidance counselor, they're a role model for some of these kids that don't have that role model in their lives, or ones that don't feel that they have that role model to go in and talk to. Go ahead and click. So what I've done is we put this together on a whole phase, and you'll see that I outlined one of them in red, programs for health, safety, and welfare. I want to say that I did the best job ever as a school resource officer, but I think we actually are lacking part of that at this point in time, and I think that that I dropped the ball in my tenure because there was so much need for the SRO at the high school and the middle school that we actually didn't spend enough time in the elementary schools and the Shaker Lane schools. One of the programs we came up with in the middle school that LCAA brought to us was Project Alert, adolescents learning experimental restrictions, and that's going to be taught this year going forward. And Officer Wazinski and a member of LCAA, Alexa, have been certified to teach this. We met with Kelly Clenchy last week, and we're going to somehow make this happen this year, whether it's through overtime funding or repositioning where her shift actually is. Go ahead and switch. So if you look at some of the facts as to where we stand today, school-based policing is vastly growing, and it's because of our society today as to where we feel the need for this officer is within the school. NASRO says there's a standard of 1 to 1,000 population. Well, that population for our school district, which I'll get to in a minute, but that 1 to 1,000 number that NASRO came up with is for a single campus. Obviously, we don't have 1,000 on one single campus. We have 4 separate campuses here in town. That school officer is there to build a relationship with the students and to bridge the gap between the police, the students, faculty, staff, and also the parents that are having their kids go to school there. I talked about population. If you look here, in Littleton, overall 4 buildings were about 2,000 in population. We are a town-wide entity, so we have to look at this also in a wholesome picture. We do have a private school here in town that we have to service, Oak Meadow Montessori School, and we do have students from, our residents from town here that actually attend Neshoba Valley Technical High School. Neshoba Tech does have a school resource officer that Westford put in there, and we have our SRO right now that's currently at the high school in talks with him about our residents that go to school there. But again, it's stretched thin because now we're talking, population of 2,000 plus another 700 at Neshoba Tech, plus the private school here in town that we're not servicing. And again, what is the role of the SRO? First and foremost, he is a police officer, she is a police officer. They are armed. In the unfortunate incident that something does happen, they are our first line of defense within the school. They're not only a police officer within the school, but they're also that liaison for different classes that are being offered. They're the guest speaker, they're the teacher in that class. I'm not sure, it wasn't really done last year or the year before, but prior years to that, there was law classes that were being taught, there was lectures being held on forensic science with Ms. Berlinger, and they're also utilized a lot in the health class during the drug education. Again, mostly at the high school at this age. And like I said, I think we're missing that point to the lower grades, and that's why we can only spread that one officer so thin. And lastly, if you look at that role, there's he's a counselor.
He or she?
He or she is a counselor. And they're a role model for some of these kids, and some of these kids need some stern talking to, rather than an actual police presence or a dean of students or a guidance counselor talking to them. They need that outside third party that they can respect. The big question, why Littleton and why now? So I think I've touched upon just about all of this so far. In 2004, our population was 8,500. Now in 2016, our population was 10,000. So there is an increase there. 21% of the population is in the school grades, K through 12. That's not including people that are already out and going to college at this point in time. But there's been no change. We've had one SRO this entire time. I think everybody can agree that our times have changed. When I first went into the schools in 2004, the campus was wide open. We didn't have any mapping in the schools. We had kids coming and going as they pleased. Elementary school had doors wide open. We've locked campuses down. We've put it in place ALICE training. We've put into place lockdown training, lock in place, fight or flight. All of these are all now being taught on a regular basis, whereas then there was nothing. And now again, we're taking that one SRO that we have at the high school and we're spreading them thin across all 4. So, how would I implement this? We talked about this quite a bit and how we would actually do this. The SRO number 1, we would actually leave in his office at the high school, based at the high school, and he would continue doing the functions that he has been doing, and he would be the supervisor of attendance. Now, I know that doesn't sound like much, but in order to file any juvenile paperwork on behalf of the school, you have to be certified by the Department of Education as a supervisor of attendance, especially any issues as to attendance or behavior within the school district that has to go to the juvenile court. You have to be certified by the DOE. We're currently getting Detective Janaka is certified right now for this school year. And it was actually funny, we were going through this, and I was going through old files and found my old certification and Pablo's old certification going through it. So it was pretty comical. And again, they co-teach the different law class and forensics classes. The SRO number 2, if we were to get it going forward, I would base he or she out of the middle school, and that middle school office would be there to take care of that whole entire campus. The Russell Street Elementary, who really hasn't had much interaction with the SROs, would have their own. They'd be at the middle school, be able to walk the walkway through the playground, and be at the other school at that point in time. Be a common goal in teaching at the Shaker Lane with the SRO from the high school, where they would share time going down to the Shaker Lane. And again, if it's basic classes that they'll be teaching, whether it's just going in and reading a safety book, or going in teaching small classes, curtailing off of the old DARE program, taking programs out of there. This would be pertinent because it would start building relationships at the lower age. When these relationships are being fostered down below, by the time they get to the high school, they have a formed a bond and a relationship that'll pay tenfold in the end. When I say what the big question always is what's this going to cost us? We would take a seasoned police officer that we already have. I would take he or she and put them into the school full-time, and I would backfill their spot on patrol with a newer officer. A newer officer for the town was going to cost us anywhere from $55,000 to $60,000, with 33% benefits on top of that. But again, this is going to be in place so that the one SRO we have now is not spread too thin, and that we can actually give the resources to the lower grades along with the high school that has had it the whole time. And it's I've listed it out there for you. It does protect our most vulnerable population, again, getting to the younger ones, and we invest in our future generations. One of the biggest things is it actually gets kids to see the officer as a human. It's Officer John that's in the school. It's just John in the school. Or then it becomes, hey, that's the guy that's in our school in the morning. We know him. It's okay to talk to him. It's okay to do this. It gives us a relationship going forward. And in years to come, it's going to pay tenfold.
Okay. I'd love to dive into money questions, but I first want to second, long-standing support for this, and your presentation underscores, why I think we're at a point where 2 is certainly appropriate. I mean, we've only had the one for 14 years, and population changes, and just the growing perception that the need is younger and younger, and the fact that we are at multiple different campuses. It just lends itself in a lot of different ways. That one SRO is not going to form a relationship with 1,600 students. 2 might. And or the 1,200 that aren't down at the lowest elementary. That I think there's the time's right. The program's proven itself, and I think the need is there.
Thank you.
Can you compare and contrast for me the roles of an SRO versus what a vice principal or a dean of students might be doing versus a guidance counselor versus a school psychologist? There's, if we have a Venn diagram, there's a lot of overlap between those positions. So help me understand, compare and contrast those.
A police officer is a police officer. They're going to handle any kind of crimes. They're going to handle any kind of smaller offenses that are going to happen within the school. A dean of students a vice principal, a guidance counselor. They're gonna handle disciplinary actions within the school, something that the SRO can't touch upon at that point in time. They'll be there, and they're gonna be a huge deterrent for these kids to do these minor behavioral issues within the school. But as an SRO, they're gonna handle more criminal aspect of it if something pops up, and hopefully be that deterrent because they are there. But no, the vice principal and deans, they're gonna handle all the behavioral issues. We would hope that the officer is able to deter some sorts of minor stuff that happens within the school, but as far as a guidance counselor in a school, guidance counselor or a psychologist, I'm not gonna compare any of my officers to a psychologist, not one bit. But I am gonna say that they are trained to deal with those that are challenged and those that are gonna need some assistance. They do a 40 to 80-hour class, all on proper ways to approach certain kids, whether they're certain kids that need medication, or they're having issues at home, or they're having issues with substance abuse. They have a variety of topics that they're gonna be certified in to touch upon every little portion of it. And if they can't give the answer that day, they're gonna be able to guide that person or that student into the right direction, along with also giving the guidance to the school psychologist or the guidance counselor or the principal as to, hey, we have an avenue for them to proceed on. We have DCF that we can contact. We have COIN. We have different avenues that they can put them into the realm that they need to be put into. So I don't know if that gets you in the right direction.
So would you think is it fair to say then that an SRO is more capable of reaching outside of the school to access resources than someone who's inside of, a guidance counselor or a school psychologist?
I think
there's a broader footprint?
I think an SRO has more contacts in their tool belt than someone like a school psychologist or a guidance counselor or a dean of students has. Yeah, absolutely. We have various avenues for us to pursue, again, outside of the school that we can actually bring in. And, through the juvenile court system, through DCF, through the various classes that they've attended with other SROs that they've already tried these different avenues, and they'll foster them into that.
How would you react to a criticism that an SRO risks criminalizing behavior that otherwise might not be criminalized absent a police officer in the school?
Again, that's going to go back to the training and the seasoned officer that we put into the school to handle that correctly. We're not there to make sure we charge a kid with a crime. Matter of fact, just the opposite of that. We want to make sure the kid or the student is not doing what they're not supposed to, and getting them, if they are doing that, let's get them into restorative justice. We have that in our tool belt, whereas the school doesn't. Or if an officer just shows up that's on patrol, and we only have 2, okay, what's the short solution to this? Rather than the SRO that's in the school may have the long-term solution for us, because he knows that kid. He knows through the guidance counselor that he's having some tough times at home. Okay, are we really going to bust him for minor crime within the school? No, we're not, because we're going to know we're going to have that relationship with them.
Yeah, sure. So to answer your, just to build on your question, Chase, I look at it as the dean of students or a school psychologist or the principal or the vice principal. They're really there in a reactive position with the school. They react to incidences that happen with the students. Whereas I look at it as an SRO is really a preventative tool for the school to prevent those incidences from happening. Just because they're in the school, they build relationships with the kids. And to build on what Chief Pennard said, it becomes to the point where they don't look at the uniform, the badge, the gun anymore. They look at them as a person that they can trust. And so really it's more of it's a deterrent from having a negative incident happen in the first place. Because they build those relationships, the kids become comfortable. They talk to them. Most of the individuals that you mentioned, I feel, only get involved if there's a problem. Whereas an SRO is there every day, just to be involved, even if there isn't a problem, just to have someone to talk to and confide in. You know, and one of the things, you know, building on the opioid crisis and what I've read and heard lately is SROs are really helping a lot of kids, not only through education and prevention with programs that teach them as a deterrent to stay away from those things, but a lot of these kids are living with these problems at home. They have parents that might be addicted, they might have lost a sibling, you know, or an uncle or an aunt, and they don't have anyone really to talk to. And especially up in Nashua, which is a huge problem compared to what we're experiencing here. But the SROs in those schools are helping kids deal with a lot of problems at home. So it's more, they become a part of the fabric of the school. And it's just a different relationship than you would get through the school psychologist or an administrator or the vice principal. It's just, it's a different approach. So I look at it differently. I know a lot of people think, oh, an SRO, they're gonna, you know, keep the school safe if there's an active shooter incident. You know, I think it's just so much more than that. It's,
God forbid that ever does happen, I'll be very thankful if the SRO was in the school that day.
right.
It
But-
isn't, you know, it is an armed guard at the school. I'm not gonna lie.
Right.
But that's not the big picture here. And I
No.
hope we never have to deal with something like that in
Right,
Littleton.
and it's more about forming those relationships before a problem arises. And they become a confidant too. They might share information with the SRO that will help deter another incident, or they might have a friend or know of a dangerous situation, and they're more apt to reach out. It was funny, I was out with my son, who's now 22, the other day, and we were talking about school resource officers, and he remembers Pablo.
Yeah.
And he was like, he is such a nice guy. I liked seeing him at school every day. He graduated in 2014. You know, but he doesn't look at him as a police officer, he's Pablo,
It's a problem.
you know?
I assume the intent is to periodically rotate officers in and out of those positions? Is that the,
No.
really?
Yeah, no,
I was just gonna say, Cindy mentioned Nashua, but Robin's brother is a police officer in Nashua, he's an SRO.
Oh, he is?
And as they go in and out, he says they find that they become much better police officers in general, just for having had that experience for a year or two.
Right.
And again, Nashua's a lot different than Littleton, I know.
I don't know how in that respect it would necessarily be, I mean.
It will, because we're a small community,
Yeah.
and, you know, they're a department of 250 guys compared to us, where we're a department of 19. For us to rotate officers through there and get them into the 80-hour training for NASRO, we're going to invest in this school resource officer. We're going to put them through the training. When we invest in this training, we don't want to just rotate them through after a couple of years. We want them to take, you know, ownership within that school and be part there. I mean, I was stationed there for 10 years. I was in the school for 10 years.
Right.
You know, that speaks volumes. You know?
And I think you want to see the kids from Russell Street reach the high school and still see that same familiar face that came down. The kid from Shaker Lane actually reach middle school and still see that same, and have that, you're looking for that bonding, that
But
that
if you're not
relationship.
eventually out on patrol again, you're never gonna see them except the school context.
No, that's not true, because if you think about it, with us being a small department, I mean, I worked patrol shift at least once a week, because we're filling overtime, we're filling the football games, we're doing road work, we're out in the uniforms constantly.
Yeah, okay, that's important.
They'll still do patrols, and they still, you know, John comes out regularly and helps out during the day.
Yeah.
There's an issue. And that's the other thing, too. If we do have a major incident in town, that's two bodies that might not be in town, that I can pull from the schools if I have to, you know, respond to these incidents.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Let me see if anyone else in the audience has any input. I know we've got fire department folks, we've got finance committee, and we've got citizens at large. Mr. Prue,
Just before I forget.
introduce yourself for the...
Mike Brew, White Pine Drive. On your last point, before I forget it, I would just say that, you know, Nashua, I don't know how many officers are in that department, but, you know, it's about hiring, to me, about hiring the right person. People we've had in our schools so far, you know, my brother-in-laws were in the high school when Chief Bernard was there, and they still have a relationship with him, they still talk to him. You know, I know someone else who, one of their classmates overdosed he called Chief Bernard to talk about it, you know, and this is, you know, just, you know, he's probably a 10-year alumni, you know, he
Right.
still calls Chief. But, you know, in a department like Nashua, you may have multiple people that could fill that role successfully, whereas here, you know, no knock on the officers we have, but they might not be a right fit, so I just want to make that point.
Yeah, good point.
I just, I wanted to thank Chief Bernard for bringing us in. He reached out to us, me and 4 other residents, he invited us in, we talked to him about it. A couple weeks later, we together decided to start a petition, see how much support we could get. We have over 200 people have signed that petition now. So there's a lot of support behind it. We, you know, I came here, I think, you know, it's probably 3 or 4 months ago now, and mentioned it. You know, I jumped the gun. Thought you were talking about the budget as it pertained to student resource officer, but it was, you know, not the right time to bring it up. But you told me to come back, start in September, start talking about, you know, the budget.
Yeah,
So
we
here
are.
we are.
Yeah.
So we're hoping to work through the process with you. Our goal was to have one in the spring. We're very happy to hear that Chief is pushing to put one in the schools this year. There are a lot of concerned people out there for all the reasons that, you know, that you might imagine. So, a lot of support out there.
Okay.
Hope that you guys will be with us.
Well, that's duly noted, and I think there's a lot of support up here, too. And granted, there's two members that aren't here tonight, but we will be formalizing our, you know, budget priorities as a board on the 24th, Keith?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and-
You'll be setting budget guidelines, and I dare say that you'll continue to come up with your priorities
Right.
right up to your budget summit.
And right now, Chief Bernard's received no instructions to do anything but go forward and make this as part of the budget proposal, and, you know, we'll see where the process goes from there. But,
Can I ask you a question in regards to that meeting on the 24th?
Yep.
Are you, I guess, are you aware of the amount of support? Do we need to pack the room?
I don't think so, but that's your right.
Yeah, no, I know, and I don't.
But there's no vote that will happen to approve funding for any budget, any town budget. It will, the guideline that we're
Right, you're
taking
talking spring, right?
is.
Right, it's the beginning of the process that brings us to the spring. I mean, you know, a couple people want to show up and show their support, that's fine. I mean, you'll probably hear it from this side of the table anyways, you know, speaking to the finance committee, the finance director, this is one of our priorities.
I would note that one letter with multiple signatories is probably favorable over multiple letters with individual signatories.
Right.
That's why I'm on the petition group.
Yeah.
You know,
Equally
and
powerful,
sending it to
probably
you.
more powerful with
Yeah.
just
No, you don't
multiple
like anything else.
signatories.
So,
Yeah.
Multiple anyways.
can I go out on a limb here? While we're
Jump
talking
ahead,
about
yeah.
budget? So I fully appreciate that we want to hopefully fund this position for next fiscal year. I would love to see if there was a way to fund it now, while we work it into the budget for next year, only because we're going to bring Project Alert on board in October. I'd really like to get the school resource officer involved with that program and just see if there's any way that we can possibly fund this position.
I mean, I would say,
this time.
we still have a compare and contrast set of work to do in front of us. I'm very interested to understand what the school recommends here. I mean, certainly, as far as the non-school budget is concerned, we could fund as many SROs as we want, and the school can submit their budget request.
Right.
But in terms of, it all comes down to a bottom line, school budget and the rest of the town budget.
Right.
I'm very interested to know if the school committee, school administration thinks that the SRO is the best way of addressing the broader need, which is supporting students, providing the resources that they need to divert them and to address problems before they arise. And I fully recognize that the SRO is one way of doing that.
Right.
And I think it's certainly a good way, and if I had my druthers, I would add multiple means of addressing that.
Right.
But without
I have a resistance from a different point of view. I just don't like undermining the operating budget process by,
Right.
you know, this is a great idea, so we're gonna, if we find a pot of money, all of a sudden this gets it. The whole idea of the budget process is competitive
Right.
amongst everybody.
And I fully appreciate that, that's why I said it's going
Yeah,
on.
okay,
the
all right.
No, I'm fully aware of that. And good points raised by you, Chase, certainly, and I don't know if Chief Bernard has any feedback on that at this time, but definitely those are legitimate questions to raise with the school.
And that's why I'm glad our meeting on the 24th
Yeah,
involves
right.
finance and school, because I want to, but
Those are great
I
questions.
think we have lots of identified need, and we have different ways of solving it, and frankly, I'm not an expert in what the school best needs, so I'm very
So it'd be nice
receptive
to hear from
to
them.
know what they think is the
Yep,
best
absolutely.
way of doing it.
Right.
Mr. Zeldin?
Mike Selden, Loanne Street. This is more of a question. The one thing that wasn't in the presentation, I think there's lots of information, is I do know that law enforcement, per law enforcement, has criteria, metrics that identify effectiveness of various programs and approaches. This is somewhat unique. I take it, I mean, I've seen lots of data on SRO, okay, and I was wondering, do you have that kind of stuff at your disposal? No. Basically to show that you can begin, as it were, assessing the relative effectiveness along the lines that Chase and others have mentioned. So the idea would be basically SRO works, and here's the kind of metrics we use in order to assess it.
You want me to address this now?
Yep.
Mike, statistical data in regards to if a program works or not can be skewed either positive or negative. And I think we need to look at the broader picture. If we can get to one kid and help that one kid, was the $80,000 worth it to save his life? And I think we need to look at that picture rather than say, we have 260 calls for service to the high school. We have 300 calls of service at the Shaker Lane School. Those are all great avenues for us to pursue, but I don't think it's the avenue we need to pursue. The avenue we need to pursue is, are we gonna help some students in the best possible way we can? And I think having a second SRO would probably be the best avenue.
At least that's the model that's on the table, it's,
Right.
And maybe the other question or answer for Cindy's question about funding sooner than the next budget cycle is to Bonnie, and we've discussed it, and we're in balance now, and we're about to set a tax rate, and you have to cut the budget in order to, you have to cut the operating budget under your own policies in order to add staffing. So it's a trade-off. Someone else's budget will
or
get.
by now have identified something that is coming in at a lower cost than.
Right, or have,
projected.
right, or have some other, but it would be a transfer. It would have to become from reducing it, and I don't know that we've identified.
Yeah,
If
I
you
would have to look through that, but I could have that for the 24th.
Yeah.
But I've got to take a review of everything anyway and give you a presentation.
Right. Okay. Is everyone satisfied that at least at this juncture, we've got this topic out on the table? And before we jump off of selectmen goals, I promised you I'd remind you about the non-budget related item on the letters to board members. This isn't.
Oh, right.
Okay,
Right.
you want to speak to that a little bit? Another topic on 2019 goals.
Right, so on the organizational piece of my goal with Paul was I call them the welcome letters, but the letters that we present to newly appointed committee members. I finalized those.
And chairs.
And chairs, yeah. So I finalized those, and basically, it's the same format that I had presented to the board before, but I included in it the specific charge of that committee that's listed on the website. So I just kind of cut and pasted it in there. So I just wanted to get the board's input on that and see if we could just finalize that and move forward with those.
And these are already approved or already
looked
blessed
at
by
drafts,
job
yeah.
descriptions,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, they're on the town website, so it's basically just the language I presented before, but just including information that's already on the town website. So-
The other actionable item is rather than wait till next May, when we would hopefully become the annual
Right.
process of doing letters to new members and chairs, but to do an introductory one
To do it in.
this
right,
fall.
This fall, right, exactly, and
Yeah.
get those out there, so I'd like to move forward with that.
Get a draft and we'll approve it.
Okay,
I like it.
all right, great.
Okay. Oh, did you want to talk about that other topic too?
Well, there was a
The
Littleton
meeting.
wait.
The meeting for the different departments?
Oh, yes, aren't you good? So the other thing that I had mentioned, that I've heard a lot from various departments and being out and about in the community, is they'd like a joint meeting, a departmental meeting. Get all the departments in one room.
Or boards.
Or in boards, and to provide just an update, just a quick synopsis, hey, this is what we have going on. Or if you're on, say you're on the planning board and you have a question with the building department, like, just an opportunity to ask those
A
questions.
summit of sorts.
Well, we're never in the same room.
Yeah, it used to be done in different forms, any old graybeards remember, years ago, in some form or other, you'd either have, the chair of each board come in, give a minute to give
Right.
what's new on their board, and everybody else gets to hear it. It's kind of like, as Cindy had said to me earlier today, what we do with the budget cycle, but that's only exclusive to the,
Right.
to the budget context, but it's for everything else that's going on. It's like, what's going on in your department, and then have
Just to
a,
improve communication, because it's hard for us. I mean, granted, we could go to the meeting and get an update, or we could read the minutes, but who has time? So I think it would be a more.
it's an opportunity to make relationships too.
Exactly,
yeah.
and then you get to see and interact with the other boards, but I think just to have everybody in the room, so one of my suggestions was gonna be to, if, usually we're planning a retreat,
Right.
but due to the transition we're gonna experience administratively, maybe in place of the retreat at this time, we go forward with the summit meeting, and try to get that in the calendar.
I think that's interesting.
Okay, maybe we'll bring it back in conversation, we get the full board, and, Keith, you got any thoughts on that?
And would
Were you
that-
listening to us over there? I know you were working.
Well, it's, sure, you want to put it on the 24th, or do you want to?
Just for a discussion, maybe?
Yeah.
Now, as far as other boards and committees, would we invite the entire board or just the chair, their
Well, that's what
designate?
we talked about.
Yeah.
So primarily, I feel extend the invitation to the chair, but let the other members know they're more than welcome to.
I like
attend
that.
and
You have to
participate.
send someone, but
Right.
you can send everyone if you so
Exactly.
choose.
When it was just chairs, we used to do it in this room, but why not do it we could do it in a bigger room where the chairs speak and everyone else is welcome to attend if they want.
Just have to set ground rules and decide how much, whether you want to be there all day.
No, oh, well, we were able to pull these off in a couple hours' time. You give everybody like, here's 2 minutes to talk about your department, boom, and then on to the next one.
Right, right.
You need the shot clock
Yeah.
for that.
And a stern taskmaster.
Right, right.
Right.
So,
I like it.
Yeah, details we can fill out later. but,
okay,
yeah. Cool, good.
great, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, thanks for the reminder.
Yep. All right, Keith, back to the administrator, for the
Okay, now
8:30 item.
Yeah, all right, we'll do the motions here. We've got highway, salt contract, routine. It's over $100,000, so it requires your vote.
Okay, straightforward,
Ready?
correct? Yep. Madam Clerk?
Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to authorize execution of a memorandum of understanding to purchase off to the VEH 107 State Road Salt Contract for 2018-2019 at $65.55 per ton for Mass DOT Area 3A.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those, the ayes have it. Keith?
Next, we have a gift of $500 from the Littleton Business Association for the Littleton Volunteer Corps, which requires your vote to accept.
And that would be the Littleton Volunteer Corps operating under the aegis of the Littleton Fire Department. Chief, do you want to add anything here, or what the Corps does, or what they're going to do with this money?
The Corps is a combination of the MRC and the CERT team that fall under emergency management. They're a group of 17 people that volunteer all their time, and they are the folks that would staff shelters in town. They've worked various functions and help at their road races, things like that. These funds would go towards training sessions for them.
Mm-hmm, perfect. Board members, any questions? Madam
Ready?
Clerk?
Move
Yep.
that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, to receive an unsolicited gift from the Littleton Business Association of $500 to be deposited into a special gift fund account to be used without further appropriation by the fire chief towards costs associated with the Littleton Volunteer Corps.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Great. Controlled burn, I know something. I've been in a couple of controlled burns.
He's having a controlled burn.
All right.
So,
Do you still allow, I mean, once upon a time when they were trying to kill me off, they allowed selectmen to go on these control. I've been to 2 of them.
is your insurance paid up?
Well, I will say this, on the
Depends on the
second
day.
one.
My wife may just toss me in there.
When my oxygen tank ran out on the second one, that was the last control burn I participated in. But you're in a burning building. What we did one on Harvard Road. You were probably in the department back then, right?
Yeah.
And the second one was up in Harvard, Mass,
Yes.
and over by the post office. But geez, you get to go in, carry the hose, you get the full uniform and gear.
suit up.
1,500 degrees at room temp, the ceiling temperature, right? Yeah, something else. So anyway. And we,
So, yes,
throwing your name in?
Roger.
no, I've done it. It's
you
just
done
me,
it?
you two. Go right ahead.
I'm good, I don't know, Chase is getting.
Roger was gracious enough to offer.
Yeah, all right, anyway, I didn't mean to get you off track, but, you know.
And, at 100 spec.
Oh, you mean we don't get to pick the home you're building, Roger, and burn it?
It's, 2-story home, it's already been cleaned out, windows have been removed. It meets all of the requirements to the state. The Board of Health, Conscom, and Building Department have already given us their approvals.
Yeah.
Right now, we're waiting for Roger's, the cleaning crew, per se, to give us the certificate, which hopefully we'll have this week, so we can give that to DEP for the final approval, on top of your approval as well.
Okay.
What does that certificate entail? What requirements need to be met before a controlled burn can be done?
Basically, that there's no asbestos on the facility. No asbestos, and vinyl siding's been removed.
Lead?
Lead paint doesn't matter. We're in.
Well, I guess I'm not worried about you guys. I'm worried about the fact that this is a burn in a residential area.
Yep.
On a Sunday, lots of people are home, we're depositing potentially hazardous building materials if they haven't been mitigated. So that's why I'm trying to understand
All of the
what
hazardous.
has to be taken out.
The hazardous building components per the DEP have been removed. So.
What does that mean?
That there is no asbestos, there is no oils, there is a component, like the asphalt shingles are allowed to stay. The rest of the building is, wood, cedar siding, things of that nature, so that all meets whatever the DEP's acceptable, their acceptable threshold is for a.
Who's doing the
for a
inspection?
live training.
Who's doing the inspection with respect to asbestos?
I had an environmental company that has done quite a few tear downs, and that's another procedure we have to do to get a demo permit,
Okay.
which this house.
So it's a
already-
licensed asbestos inspector?
Yes, yes. They take samples of the floors, the walls, ceilings,
Okay.
and send it out to a lab, and they get a report there.
Okay, so they're pulling up tiles, they're looking at mastic, they're looking at, okay.
Yeah, that's.
Sorry, you
No,
guys
that's all
probably
things
assumed
that
that
we've
this would
done.
be a perfunctory thing, but
Yeah, we've done that, the same thing in all of our previous training burns, right? In our last one, they actually had, pulled up all of the basement tiles, mastic, cleaned everything prior to us burning.
You're looking to do this, what, the weekend after next, huh?
It would be on Sunday, the 23rd.
Yeah.
Yep.
And abutters, or not necessarily abutters, folks in the area, how are they notified that this is going on?
All of the abutters will have hand-delivered letters
Okay.
the week before.
I said
we
abutters,
receive
and I
all of our-
probably didn't mean just abutters, but.
We do a 500-foot radius.
Okay,
That's what
I guess
we
that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yep, so probably everybody on Cricket Lane, the first half of Whitetail, up and down.
Could I
everybody.
ask you guys to be liberal with that 500-foot radius, just to make sure folks
Oh, yeah.
are well-informed?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah, it'll be on our Facebook and Twitter, it's on, we try to give warning. and
Think
make
about
sure
maybe
that-
having a sign at the dump the day before, which is the Saturday, right, or
Well,
something?
and that's why we didn't do it on Saturdays, because of the
The dump traffic, yeah.
So we tried to, limit the traffic, we have to run hose lines from 2 different directions, we need 2 dedicated water sources. So that, you know, there is a little bit of an impact to the area.
Traffic control plan on Spec Pond Road?
There will be signage out, there will be signage on both ends of Spec. We do have, Roger has a nice gravel area up there, so we'll be able to stage apparatus off the road. If we
Okay.
can try to, you know, keep a lane open,
Detail necessary or no?
probably not.
You got other departments participating or just Littleton?
We will, we'll have probably another one or two there to do the drill with us while another covers it.
I think it's a great exercise, but these opportunities come up very rarely, so.
Correct,
So,
correct.
thank you, Roger, and I know you were about to speak, so.
Well, speaking of signage, we're allowing anybody with a high-density sign to drop it off at the burn. We can tuck it inside the house.
Bring your own marshmallow.
Is that all right? You stayed here late at night, if that's why, if you stayed here to say
Waiting all
that.
night to
yeah.
say
He's
that.
had that queued up for a long
Yeah,
time.
exactly. Chief, just one question, the other boards, have they already reviewed this, Board of Health,
Yes,
Conservation?
Board of Health, Conscom, Building Department, they've already given us permission.
Okay,
Last question for you guys. Sorry, I'm sure you didn't expect this to involve so many questions.
He's all fired up
he
tonight,
is,
isn't he?
he's on a roll tonight. It's not-
Somebody's got to
it's
fill
not-
in the void for Joe
Yeah.
and Paul. What are we using to put out the fire? Just water, or are there any chemicals applied?
Water,
Just water?
yeah.
Okay. That's it, I think.
And we're not in a water district area, so there's no, Conscom looked over that and it doesn't.
Yeah, you'd be well outside of that. Not almost everyone over there is
If you were
on.
building a house, that's a problem, but if you're burning one down, it's not a problem, okay.
Everyone over there is on drinking water wells. So, yeah, so no foams, nothing but water.
Water.
Okay.
I think you should do it, Chase.
I'm game.
Yeah, I think you should.
You go up the ladder. Yeah, 110 feet, right up there.
We'll put you over it.
Yeah.
Be on the fire.
Are you gonna have the ladder there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have everything there.
If it starts.
I mean,
The house is about 20 feet tall, what are you gonna do with a little ladder?
just have it far away.
And you set it up for control. You set it up on that mist when it's on
Suppose if
full rip.
you got
so that-
toys, you're gonna use them.
Well, you need to control embers and everything else that's
Right.
flying away on full rip, you know?
Just make sure there's oxygen in those tanks, so we don't want our young friend here to get the
What day are we doing it here?
23rd, week from Sunday.
No, we have air, maybe air drum.
Yeah, the Bills are probably gonna lose to somebody that day anyways.
Hey, they scored a field goal. Easy.
Okay,
A lot better than Peterson's 5 interception half last time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're on the right trajectory.
Okay,
5
yeah,
interceptions, now we got a field goal, and
okay.
one step at a
Sorry, I
time.
picked a sore spot. Okay, motion?
Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the fire chief's plans for a department training exercise on Sunday, September 23rd, 2018, for a controlled burn at 100 Spectacle Pond Road, and approve an agreement with property owner R.D. Kennard Home, Inc., therefore, subject to approvals as to form by town council.
Second?
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Great. Who needs to sign that letter? Is that good enough for you or me, or who's supposed to?
We don't have anything to sign.
Our last one that we had from town council, Mr. Bergman signed and the
That's fine.
property owner.
Okay, I just noticed in the language there, it said approve an agreement, but we don't need to have that signed?
Yeah, we don't have the agreement. in front
Okay.
of us.
But we will. Just in case there's a
There will be an
horrific
There
tragedy.
will be an agreement, and it will get signed before the
Okay.
controlled burn happens. This is the authorizing vote to that.
Yep, all right. Then it's all, I think it was an affirmative, right? Did we vote, Anthony? Were you paying attention over there? I think I got through that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Roger.
24th.
Okay. All right, minutes. We've got
3 cents.
we have 3 sets here, plus Cindy had circulated to the board members executive session from our date of,
Right, for which you need to go into executive
Right.
session. to-
oh, we have to vote that in executive
You've
session?
got an executive session.
Right, okay, all right. Then on these 3, the August 13th, 20th, and 27th. Folks,
I move to accept the motion, or the minutes for those dates as written.
Second.
okay, motion's made and seconded then to accept the meeting minutes as presented for the August 13th, 20th, and 27th meetings. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Keith, now you had advised us at the beginning of the meeting, there's an opportunity here potentially to do one half of our
Yes,
prospective things
that-
in open session?
Yes, that we have, if the board feels you would like to go into executive session first to discuss the union contract, the fire union contract, you may. However, you may wish to not do that because we'll just say it's on the same terms as the other three contracts, basically the same terms that you've reached with the other three unions.
And everybody's had the supported documents too. For a
Right,
few
and-
days.
right,
Yeah.
and we've discussed all the particulars in executive session before, and if you wanted to do a vote in the clear, you could just vote to ratify the contract, which is the motion that's on the
Okay,
screen.
so no pressure, but if you feel comfortable that you're okay with where it's at,
Right.
we can handle that and just go with the second vote, otherwise we can go into executive session and discuss. Preferences?
Let's move it along.
Move it along?
Yep.
Okay, then, you wanna make the second motion then?
Yep, this one, yep.
This one up here?
Mhm.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to ratify a 3-year contract with Littleton Professional Firefighters, LAFF Local, is it I? IAFF Local 4599 for the period of July 1st, 2018 through July 30th, 2021, including salary schedule adjustments for 2% in year 1, 2% in year 2, and 2% in year 3, and further to vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 150E, Section 7B, to submit to the October 29th, 2018 special town meeting a request for an appropriation necessary to fund cost items contained therein.
Second?
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? In terms of discussion, I'd say this, for all those involved in making this happen, administratively, in the department, and to our firefighters, thank you all for getting it done. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? The ayes have it. Great.
Great.
So we are looking at it, going into executive session now for purposes of discussing non-union contract strategy. We also should note for the record that we have a set of executive session minutes to approve in executive session 2.
So that would be just B on this, just that one.
Yeah.
All right. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, subsection A2, to go into executive session to strategy?
Yeah, to discuss.
To discuss strategy with respect to contract negotiations with non-union personnel and not to convene an open session thereafter.
Okay, and this has to be a roll call vote, and I guess we would invite Chief Wodzinski as well as Keith and Anthony to join us. So with that, Ms. Napoli?
Aye.
Mr. Gerbig?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Mr. Glavy, aye. So thank you and good night, folks.